video you are about to watch is a police interview conducted shortly after a missing person was officially reported. The contents of this video were exclusively shared with the Decoder by the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office. Viewer discretion is advised.
Does he have any reason to
just disappear?
I don't know, make it look like he's disappeared?
I don't think so. I mean, he was very, possessive.
It began like any other missing persons case.
On Friday, the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office says they received a missing person report for 23-year-old Bryce Brogel. Brogel was last seen leaving a home in Center Township on Wednesday.
But this was no ordinary disappearance. Bryce was last seen on October 26, 2022, in a small rural Minnesota town. His girlfriend, Cordelia LaFlex, made the frantic call to authorities 2 days later. She told them Bryce had been heading to a storage unit with her father. That was the last anyone heard from him.
And then you left here.
We left here.
And where did this interaction happen?
It happened just right out here. We got out, got this down, started to get up to speed, and the lights came on, and it happened right down here.
But there was lights on them?
Yeah, it was the ones that come up front. I didn't see anything up top, but there was the ones that came on there, and then the car, it was kind of a dark gray, and it kind of looked like the new Taurus.
Okay.
But I'm not 100. Like I said, it came by like that and pulled in front of the vehicles, and they put him in the back seat. The other one up, the officer, walked around, got in the car, passenger seat, and they left.
As investigators dug deeper, they would discover a series of unsettling text messages from Cordelia to Bryce on the night he went missing. Messages filled with concern, confusion, and fear. "I love you. Miss you already. You planning on coming back for me? Please." But Bryce never responded. And the deeper this investigation went, the more twisted it became. A case of a missing 23-year-old turning into something far darker than the detectives could have imagined. A storage unit, a sled, and a haunting discovery in the woods. Let's dive into the chilling story of Bryce Brogel's disappearance. It was October 26, 2022, when Cordelia's longtime boyfriend disappeared into thin air. It was a cold day in Center Township, with temperatures hovering just above freezing for most of the day. This lakeside region was sparsely populated and littered with resorts designed for urbanites to escape into nature. Now, with temperatures dropping, the tourists had gone home, and Cordelia, who lived in the same town as her father and her boyfriend and had just come home from a months-long trip, waited for Bryce to come home. He'd gone to a nearby storage complex with her father to drop off some of his belongings. Cordelia had been dating Bryce for 8 months, since February 2022, and they'd got back into town just that afternoon following a trip across the country. Bryce was familiar enough with her father, Michael, that they went off to the facility on their own. Cordelia stayed home and showered and texted Michael again, getting impatient. There was no ostensible reason a trip to the storage facility should take so long. The LaFlex house was only a third of a mile away from the facility, barely 10 minutes walking distance. Eventually, her father came home alone. He told her that Bryce had been arrested when they were at the storage complex. Some official-seeming men in 2 unmarked vehicles had shown up and taken him away in handcuffs. According to Michael, they had not shown any identification, and he had no explanation for it, what agency they might have come from, or what the charge might have been. This was Cordelia's father, and she had no reason not to believe his account. She texted Bryce again, "Baby," and waited for him to call her or text her back to explain what had happened. But he never did. So, on Friday, October 28th, with no more information, she went to the Crow County Sheriff's Office and filed a missing persons report. She had no more information to give the police than Michael had told her, and so Michael LaFlex was the first stop in their investigation. They tracked Michael down at a family Halloween party in Brainerd, and he took them to the storage facility where they interviewed him.
I figured when she had said, she goes, Dad, I'm going to go file a missing person report. And I was the last one seen with him.
Yep.
And I said, okay. And so I figured sometime, if not today, tomorrow, you guys will be talking with me. So.
Michael was cooperative with their questioning.
If we could just start again with what happened there.
So we came here, we unloaded, we pulled out.
And you're driving this
the white Escape with a U-Haul trailer.
So you guys, you drove right up here from the house.
Yes.
Unloaded. Well, how long did that take?
Oh, 45 minutes maybe. Maybe. Because he was looking at stuff and trying to figure out if he was going to keep something or take something.
Michael explained that they'd gone to the storage unit to sort through Bryce's belongings after his long trip away with Cordelia. It had taken a while as Bryce decided what he wanted to keep or get rid of. So after heading to the storage unit around 5 p.m., Michael said they were done there at about 5:45. It was as they were leaving that things took a turn.
It happened just right out here. We got out, got this down, started to get up to speed, and the lights came on.
According to Michael, he and Bryce had been intercepted in the car, Michael's white Ford Escape, on their way out of the storage facility. These strangers had lights on their vehicles, though not the traditional overhead siren lights, instead the kind used on unmarked police cars. They took both Michael and Bryce into custody.
Which vehicle did you end up in?
The white one.
The white.
The white Ford Escape.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Bryce ended up in which one?
The dark gray, whatever it was.
He was driving the white Escape.
Yeah. Yes.
So which vehicle did you end up?
Oh, the SUV.
Okay. And Bryce was put in which one?
The gray car.
And was there a cage in this car?
Not in the one I was in. It looked from the inside. It was plain Jane. It had a small in the center on the center console. It had a small. Looked like computer or something, but it was folded down.
Michael said that the two of them were separated. If this was an official arrest, it was a serious operation with multiple officers involved.
Did he say anything to you when Bryce?
No, he didn't. I mean, when we left here, he said thank you for your help, and that was it.
Did you guys have any other conversations?
No, I mean, I asked him on the way up here how the drive was. He said nice, decent. It really, I didn't care to talk with him.
There were hints of strife within the family, that Michael didn't particularly want to spend time with Bryce. Why then had Michael offered to take Bryce to the storage unit without his daughter?
Did Cordelia not want to come with, or what was the deal? How come she could come with?
Said she was smelly and stuff and needed to shower.
Okay.
From Michael's perspective, this was an ordinary outing to the storage facility, hijacked by whatever trouble Bryce had got himself into. Bryce and Cordelia had returned from their trip across the U.S. just that afternoon, and he thought it could be related to that.
Did you know she was coming back?
She called me. She called me Sunday and said, Dad, I'm going to be back in a week or so. And I was like, oh, sweet. She said, what's going on? She said, well, things just fell apart over here. And then that was Sunday during the day, and then Monday, she called me, and she said, Dad, we're coming home tonight. And I said, what? She said, yeah, we're leaving tonight. This thing's turned really bad, and we gotta go.
From the sounds of things, Cordelia and Bryce had got themselves mixed up in something more than they could handle, possibly something criminal.
After this went down, I went back, because I thought she was going to be taken too. I figured when I got back to the house, she was going to be gone.
So you're thinking there's just something bad that they got into out there?
Out in Washington, or I did hear the two, when the guy was taking cuffs out of me, he did say Arizona. He did say Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Together, Cordelia and Bryce had traveled across the country to Arizona and Washington State. They'd left the day after Cordelia's graduation party in June and spent 4 months away from home together. 4 months in which anything could have happened. And Michael clearly believed that something had.
So when I got home, I said, what the hell happened? I said, what's going on? I said something. I said, Bryce has been arrested. I said, and they were saying Arizona. And she's like, Dad, nothing. Well, then I did get out of her that the cops were called a couple times, but it was because she went to work with bruises on her face.
Nothing came of these interactions with the cops, apparently. For Michael, however, this was a recurring problem, and perhaps the root of his dislike of Bryce.
Last spring, when he came to stay with us in March and stayed with him, there was a lot of verbal abuse towards Cordelia. There was a time where she came down with a big bruise on her face, which she said that was wrestling. My other daughter said it could be that. It was not, and then heard her crying. So there's always been the fighting and him being that way.
Michael claimed that Bryce was a heavy pot smoker and that both he and Cordelia had 2 phones, one ordinary and one flip phone that could be easily disposed of. Locating Bryce's phone was obviously a matter of urgency for the investigators, but Michael said he didn't know where they were. And as the interview progressed and the sky grew dark, he gave more details he said Cordelia had told him.
She said
That Bryce said on the way back that he had a feeling that somebody was going to get arrested when he got back here. She said the FBI.
But the investigators were aware of the possibility that Bryce's disappearance could be related to something else. They considered that maybe it could have been staged.
Does he have any reason to
Just disappeared?
or make it look like he's disappeared?
I don't think so. I don't think, no. I mean, she said they were going to be going back to Montana to work. And that they were, I mean, he was very, what's the word, possessive of her. All her phones, or all her emails and everything went through his phone so he could watch who she was talking to. I think her Facebook, everything was going through his phone so he could screen everything.
The investigators asked to look at Michael's phone so they could examine its location data and confirm where he'd been on Wednesday evening as the last person to see Bryce.
You know, I got home, we ran to Brainerd, I actually went and talked to my uncle.
But Michael's wires were getting crossed. Only about 10 minutes after Michael had denied having Bryce's phone, the investigators asked him about it again.
And you've never had his phone, never want possession of it today?
It was in the vehicle.
Okay.
I took it. I did take it. And I just wanted my daughter to get away from him.
He said he'd thrown it into the trash at a gas station in Brainerd that evening. His reason for this highly suspicious behavior? He wanted to protect his daughter.
I was scared, to tell you the truth. I was scared of the whole situation. And I wasn't sure. I was afraid, honestly, of somebody tracking it and coming after my daughter.
A contradictory picture was emerging. On the one hand, there was the terrifying story of a couple pursued by law enforcement, Bonnie and Clyde style, all the way across the country. On the other, there was Michael's obvious dislike and suspicion of his daughter's boyfriend. To understand this complicated situation, we'll need to dive into what we know about Bryce and Cordelia's relationship and the LaFlex family dynamic. Bryce Brogle was born in Brainerd in September 1999. He just recently turned 23 while on his cross-country trip with Cordelia. And this was a trip that represented everything he loved, which was exploring out west and living an independent, back-to-basics life. His dream was to build a yurt in Alaska and create a self-sufficient farm. He and Cordelia met in February 2022 and bonded over their love of dogs and their similar goals of adventuring. Younger than Bryce, she graduated in June 2022, and that's when they took off across the country. Part of her drive to travel was an overbearing home life. She considered her parents to be helicopter parents who had boundary issues. Once, according to Cordelia, her parents had hired a private investigator to follow one of her previous boyfriends. Her mother had Huntington's disease, and her younger sibling, of whom she was very supportive, was transgender. Both of these things factored into a tense family environment at times, but according to Cordelia, it was her father, Michael, who was the most stressful presence in the house, though he seemed to be devoted to his family. He even had a tattoo that read "Daddy's Little Girls" with a stylized illustration of them with him in silhouette. Born in 1977, Michael was 45 and had grown up in Pequot Lakes, Minnesota, a suburb of Brainerd. His parents were divorced and his mother had remarried, having more children in the new relationship, which left Michael with younger half-siblings. He graduated from Pequot Lakes High School in 1996 and moved up into Center Township soon after that. He'd worked construction in the past and was now self-employed, working a variety of odd jobs in the neighborhood. This was not Michael's first run-in with the law. Early in 1999, at the age of 21, he pleaded guilty to criminal sexual conduct in the third degree and was sentenced to 5 years probation. In 2018, he pleaded guilty to another sex offense, this time fourth-degree criminal misconduct with an adult considered developmentally disabled and mentally impaired. Records suggest that initially this person refused to have sex with him, but eventually agreed when he insisted. As a result, he'd taken a polygraph test in the past. In fact, he'd taken 4.
One of the things, I don't know that we're at that point in this investigation, is a polygraph test.
Yeah.
Okay? In Minnesota, polygraph tests can't be used against you. So if you take it and you fail, it's not like we can say, you failed.
Yeah.
Okay? But if you take it and you pass, it's just one more thing and we're like, all right, just put it.
Yeah.
So that's a tool that's out there. We have it available to us. It would be, I would explain the whole test to you.
I've taken them before.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually passed 4 you had to take.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you understand how they work.
Yeah.
But that was a very different type of crime from the one that might have been committed here. Bryce Brogle had been missing for 2 days, and Michael's story was suspicious. And he even told them he'd threatened Bryce before.
I just said, if I ever see another bruise on her, I said I won't be having words with you.
But he seemed to anticipate this line of questioning.
Doing something to him wouldn't change my daughter in that way. She's got to come to the conclusion that I don't want this anymore if she's being abused. And as much as it hurts and hard, I got to let her make that decision. I mean, I can't,
Sometimes it's not even doing so. I have daughters myself, and I just a little bit you told me.
Yeah.
I can tell this is torn you off.
Yeah.
Her being away with him, him controlling her. You never know when you're going to see her or hear from her again.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what I would do.
Yeah. No,
and it might be just something as far as I'm going to scare the living shit out of this kid and keep him away from my daughter.
Talking to the investigators outside the storage unit, he always used the past tense to refer to Bryce.
He wouldn't stop. He's the type that he thinks he's overly smart. He always bragged about when he took tests, he scored off the charts. And I just told him that usually people that talk like that are dumb. But that was what he was. And I've I'm in counseling. And talked to her, and it's the same thing. I realized that I've got to let her do it. Oh, I thought you were with my phone. I was okay.
No, my phone.
So, yeah.
Well, like I say, I'm a dad.
No, yeah.
I understand. I mean, from what you're describing.
Yeah. I have another daughter to watch out for and take care of. And I'm not going to put that in jeopardy. I'm not going to put going to prison in jeopardy. Being away from my family, my girls.
Yep.
And that's not worth it. And again, it'd mean more to me to see my daughter say, I don't want you anymore. I want to be done with you because you hurt me. And then if he won't leave her alone, do it through the proper channels of restraining order. Or if he's beating her, go through the proper channels and get him arrested. That's how I want to beat him. I want to beat him with this versus these, or have somebody else beat him. I'm not. So.
Well, at this point in time, I hope you feel like we're just doing our job.
Yeah.
And we hope that you would be able to tell us whatever you want.
I have told you everything that I know and
Is there any surprises when we get more of the phone data back from your phone, his phone?
shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be is usually an answer that tells me that there's something.
There's nothing from my phone. I mean, I'm all over the place. I mean, I don't.
Yes, when you had it, were there people calling? Did you answer a phone?
No, I didn't answer anything. Actually shut it off. You know.
When did it get turned back on?
It never did.
It's been on.
Then I never did.
It doesn't go through your voicemail.
Because I never turned it on. Maybe I didn't shut it off. No, there shouldn't be anything. I mean, I'm all over the countryside, here and there and everywhere. So I'm in the woods, deer hunting, or
At the end of this interview, the investigators checked and could find no record of an outstanding warrant for Bryce Brogel's arrest, or that he'd ever been taken into custody. They also searched for both of his cell phones at the gas station in Brainerd, and they found them in a garbage can, where Michael had said he'd disposed of them.
Who's that by the truck right now? Is that Mike that's at the back of the truck?
Yeah, looks like he's putting ice in the back.
Did he stop in the store and buy ice, I'm assuming then?
Yeah. I think that's what he bought. That's what bag size looked about right.
When they examined the data on Michael's own phone, they found that he'd left home at 4:45 a.m. on October 27th, the day after Bryce went missing, and went back to his storage unit. He stayed there for 22 minutes before heading to a spot of public land by Lake Edward, staying there for an hour. It was becoming increasingly clear that the storage unit was the scene of a crime. On October 29th, the police executed a search warrant on it. On the unit's concrete floor, they found a bottle of bleach that held traces of both Bryce and Michael's DNA, the remains of a substance that tested positive for blood, and marks consistent with something heavy being dragged on a sled. And on October 30th, they followed the evidence of Michael's cell phone location data to the spot near Lake Edward. In the middle of the woods, it was far from civilization, not a place that could easily be stumbled upon.
So it's a sandy, previously dug area that they broke off branches and stuck them in the ground.
Fresh leaves on top.
And then fresh leaves on top. But it's,
This is probably animals.
We kind of dug down with their boots about 6-8 inches and don't see anything, but this is probably, it's really odd.
The leaves on top of this freshly dug site didn't match the surrounding fallen leaves, as if someone had made an attempt to disguise the area. But they hadn't disguised it well enough. When an excavation team arrived, the grave was dug up and they found a body. It was the body of Bryce Brogel, and he'd been shot in the back of the head. Michael LaFlex was undeniably implicated in this murder now that the body had been discovered. But this wasn't a surprise to law enforcement, because 2 days earlier, his two half-siblings had gone to the police to tell them that Michael had confessed. When Michael got back from speaking with the investigators at the storage unit on October 28th, he talked to his sister, Jen Baker, whose party he'd been at earlier that evening. He asked to borrow her car, as he said he was concerned the police would follow his truck. When she asked him why, he told her he needed to bury Bryce's body. He confessed to shooting Bryce in the back of the head. He told her not to worry because they'd never find the body. He told her he'd used a sled to move it as it was too heavy to move by hand, and he took a bag of leaves she had by the garage to cover it up once he'd buried it. This sled was later found in a ditch on the way to the storage unit, covered with a blanket. It had a dried red-brown substance on it. When Michael was gone, Jen called her brother, Michael's half-brother, Patrick, and told him what Michael had told her. Patrick was a night shift clerk in Pequot Lakes, and the local police interacted with him often. He had a bond of trust with them, and so when Jen told him this chilling revelation, he went to the police, asking that he remain anonymous. It was common knowledge in their family, apparently, that Michael believed Bryce was abusing Cordelia. But everything he'd said to the investigators, that Cordelia needed to make her own choices and could only realize that Bryce was toxic on her own, had been a lie. Michael was arrested for the killing. In November 2022, he was arraigned on a charge of second-degree murder without premeditation. He had shot Bryce in the back of the head from a distance in the storage unit, and then moved his body on a sled to the spot in the woods after cleaning the storage unit. He buried the body and ineffectually covered up the dig site. But as the investigation moved forward, another witness emerged: Bryce and Cordelia's landlord in Washington State. The landlord said that Michael had called him and asked if Bryce had hurt his daughter. When the landlord told him that he'd seen Cordelia with 2 black eyes, Michael said that he was going to kill Bryce and that he'd already had the hole dug. When pressed, Michael's half-brother corroborated this. Michael had told him the same thing. This aligned with other details of the case. Michael stored his firearms at his half-sister Jen's house. On October 26th, just hours before Cordelia and Bryce arrived back home in Minnesota, Michael had collected one of his guns, saying he needed it to kill a rodent at a job site where he was working. This hadn't been a killing in the heat of the moment. This had been a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. On March 30th, 2023, the prosecutors upgraded the charge, and Michael was indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree murder. His trial took place a year later, in 2024. Michael took the stand and maintained that Bryce had been abusive, remembering times he'd seen Cordelia with bruises that she'd denied or explained away. He said that in July 2022, a month into her trip with Bryce, she texted her father to come get her. She never shared her location, and a few days later she said everything was fine. And this was the line she held during the trial. She maintained that her relationship with Bryce was never physically violent and that she had been happy with him. Her Facebook posts reflected this. On October 31st, when her father had already been arrested for the killing, she wrote, "A very special person was taken from me, but I know now that he will never leave. He's my guardian angel forever. I love you so much, Bryce." She continued to reminisce about him on her public social media as her father was indicted, and she never supported his claims. In his testimony, Michael admitted killing Bryce. However, he denied it had been premeditated. He said he'd brought Bryce out to the storage unit to provoke him into a fight so that he could press charges and then keep Bryce away from his daughter. He said he just happened to have the gun with him after dealing with vermin at a client's house earlier that day. He claimed he confronted Bryce about his treatment of Cordelia and that Bryce said, "She is mine and she is my business," and that he would kill her before ever giving her up. This, Michael said, was when he shot Bryce, in the heat of the moment, to protect his daughter. However, the jury did not agree with him. In April 2024, they found him guilty on 1 count of first-degree premeditated murder and a lesser count of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Cordelia continues to memorialize Bryce on Facebook, writing in March 2024 about Bryce and another person she'd lost, "I think about you and Bryce all the time." On March 12, 2023, police in Vancouver, Washington received a call from a worried grandmother. Her daughter and granddaughter, 27 and 6 years old, had gone missing. Meshay was a single mother, and her daughter Layla was her whole world. There was no obvious reason for them to abscond without telling their family members. Something darker was at play.
It's been since last Sunday since anybody heard, seen, or talked to my daughter and granddaughter.
I'm missing a whole part of me. That's my sister and that's my niece. We don't know where they're at.
One of the last people to see Meshay Melendez alive was this man, Kirkland Warren. He was Meshay's ex-boyfriend, and they'd had a tumultuous relationship. But Kirkland said they were working things out, or they had been, when Meshay and her daughter disappeared. A young mother and a vulnerable child. It was imperative that the police find these two missing persons as soon as possible. But soon enough, their investigations would reveal a twisted history and a murder that would leave Vancouver scarred for generations to come.
I don't come here with all questions. I do have some answers. What do you think my answers are?
Let's uncover those answers here on The Decoder, where we'll dive into exclusive interview and body cam footage to tell the terrible story of what happened to Meshay Melendez. Vancouver, Washington is one of the state's most populous cities. On the border with Oregon and close to the West Coast, it has a violent crime rate of 6.32 per 1,000 residents. This is higher than the state average, and made it even more concerning when Meshay Melendez and her daughter went missing in March 2023. 27-year-old Meshay was last seen with her daughter Layla by a friend in a burgundy Dodge Charger on the morning of March 12th. The driver of this car was Kirkland Warren, her ex-boyfriend. It seemed likely that he had been the last person to see Meshay alive. March 22nd, 2023. What seemed like an ordinary day in a prison in Vancouver, but for this detective, waiting at the chess table to conduct an interview, it was the most important day in this case. He'd been tasked with finding missing Meshay and Layla. He could only hope he'd ask all the right questions.
I guess first of all, how are you holding up?
As I can.
As you can, okay. Because we're here in a jail, I'm a regional Miranda rights, so I'm a missing persons detective, okay? I also do a few other things like cell phones and computers. I'm a bit of a geek, but part of me being a geek is I also have to do missing persons. So in my missing persons investigation, Joanne told me at some point in the night of March 12th, she saw you with, is it Meshay or Misha?
Meshay.
Kirkland said that he, Meshay, and Layla had stayed the night together in a friend's apartment.
Did she say she was going somewhere? Can you tell me anything about that?
No, there was no talk about going anywhere. We had went out. Well, initially we came over to Joe's house because she was a mutual friend.
Okay.
We just came over there this is really my girlfriend, so.
So you guys went over to Joe's because she's a mutual friend, right?
We were literally just going to talk and be together. We slept together that night, everything.
He said they were meeting to reconcile after some drama in their relationship. According to him, everything went well that night, and they left Joe's house in the morning as planned.
Joe says that she saw, at some point in the night, you and Meshay left, you guys came back, and then you and left the apartment with Meshay, who apparently was out in your car. What kind of car do you drive?
Charger.
The Dodge Charger, right? Yeah. And then where did you guys go after that?
It wasn't nighttime then. It was the morning time. We didn't go anywhere. Meshay had parked the car down the street. We went down the street and took her to the car.
Okay.
And that was it.
Kirkland told the investigator that Meshay had left her car further down the street and that he drove her and her daughter over to it. He let them out and they drove away. This, according to him, was the last time he ever saw the pair alive. Meshay and Layla were reported missing on March 18th, 6 days later. Meshay was an independent woman with her own life, but she wouldn't do something reckless like disappear without telling her family. She took good care of her daughter, who often appeared in her TikTok videos, doing dances with her mom. Layla, though only 6, was doing well in school and had a promising life ahead of her. Meshay once said, "I don't know how I got blessed with such an amazing daughter. She was beloved by her mom and her mom's entire family, including Meshay's mother, Layla's grandmother. When her mom didn't hear from her all week, she called the police." The Vancouver Police Department conducted a welfare check on Meshay's apartment. and found no sign of Meshay and Layla. But the next day, Meshay's mom, desperately searching for her daughter and granddaughter, discovered Meshay's car. It was abandoned in the Van Mall neighborhood, the same neighborhood where she and Layla had stayed with Kirkland on the night of the 11th. Kirkland said he'd tried to contact her that same day.
And then I tried contacting her later on that day because she had left her purse. And then
I'm sorry, she left her purse?
She left her purse.
Okay, so she left her purse in your car?
Yeah.
Okay.
But literally after that, Joe, even then, I had tried to, I didn't call her on a regular phone. I called her Google Duo, just because she said it was the safest. Called her Google Duo, she wasn't picking up.
And this is because she's missing, right? Like you were trying to get a hold of her and you couldn't.
I mean, it wasn't a big concern at first because
okay.
I literally just thought she was just ignoring me for a little bit or something.
Kirkland and Meshay had an on-again, off-again relationship. It didn't seem unusual that she wouldn't contact him for a while. He said he went to a bagel shop after dropping her off and then to another friend's house, Nettie's. Her absence didn't concern him until she was reported missing nearly a week later.
So where do you think they're at?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
Is there any history of them running off?
Not that I know of.
No.
Okay, so when you went over to Nettie's, what did you and Nettie do?
We just hung out, ate a bagel, and just watched TV.
Did you buy her a bagel too?
Yeah.
Is she like a girlfriend?
No.
No, she's just a friend.
Meshay is my girlfriend. Meshay is my girlfriend. But me and my wife are in the process of being separated.
Kirkland grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He was the son of a municipal judge who resigned in 2009 following allegations of misconduct, including second-degree forgery, abuse of office, and attempted theft of property. In the last few years, Kirkland had moved to Vancouver, Washington, where he married a woman named Monet Tyler Warren. She and Kirkland had 2 daughters. Aged 26 in the spring of 2023, she worked at a bank in Portland. But she'd recently been accused of stealing money from customer accounts and transferring it to others. The theft amounted to nearly $25,000. This wasn't a random, unconnected incident. On November 21st, 2022, Monet's credentials were used to alter account information at the credit union in order to steal, and $20,000 was transferred into an account under Meshay Melendez's name. Meshay was also seen on surveillance footage opening an account at the credit union that same month and exiting Monet's car. The 2 women knew each other and may have been tangled up in a criminal scheme together. This made sense with Meshay's social media presence. She was an active TikTok user until her last post on December 20th, 2022. Right around the time of the thefts from the credit union, she began to go dark online, perhaps trying to minimize her exposure in case of an investigation. In both of her last posts, she could be seen with Kirkland. But what was Meshay and Monet's connection? How had they developed the scheme if they were indeed both involved? The only thing the 2 women had in common was one man, Kirkland Warren. And Monet blamed Kirkland when she was questioned by police. She said she'd been changing the account information on behalf of her husband, who'd asked her to help him steal money. He said he was divorcing Monet, but his relationship with her wasn't just turbulent, it was criminal. And this went for his relationship with Meshay, too. They'd been staying at their friend's apartment instead of one of their own for a specific reason, a restraining order.
You guys were going to stay, how long you guys been staying there?
Literally the first night.
Okay, gotcha.
Because we, like I said, wasn't trying to violate or get caught violating.
Understood.
The previous December, Meshay had called 911 to report that Kirkland had assaulted her, including firing shots at her balcony window as she was looking outside. In February, investigators had corroborated her story with a friend, who was also present during the altercation. But a mere 2 weeks later, on February 17th, Meshay recanted the accusation. She said she'd lied about the shooting and that she and her friend both had mental health and substance abuse problems. She discredited herself and wanted the police to assure her that Kirkland wouldn't be arrested. But the police found this suspicious. On March 2nd, they arrested Kirkland on charges of second-degree domestic violence assault, drive-by shooting, making a false statement, harassment, and possession of a stolen firearm. The prosecutor said he posed an extreme risk to Meshay's safety, with a score of 31 on a scale of 1 to 18. The judge held him on bail of $100,000 and ordered a domestic violence no-contact order. Kirkland violated this order within only hours of its issue. He called Meshay twice from the Clark County Jail, saying she was the reason he'd been arrested and that he needed her to get the charges dropped. She said she was trying her best. He was released on bail later that day, but was cited in court for violating the no-contact order. A higher bail and GPS monitoring was ordered on March 6th, but the next day the case was dismissed, and he was not fitted with a GPS monitor.
They're not protected. DV has never really been taken seriously. The restraining orders are false security blankets. He was released with no GPS in the first place.
With this troubled history, he was the first suspect the police looked to in their investigation of the mother and daughter's disappearance. They served a search warrant for his house and car, and on March 19th, they took him into custody based on the violation of the order.
Hey, show me your hands, it's the police. Put your hands on top of your head and raise your fingers.
Listen, you are under arrest for a violation, okay? Do you understand? If you do not obey commands, force may be used against you. Do you understand?
This gave the police the opportunity to interview him about Meshay and Layla.
So, I mean, I'm trying to gather leads, right? So if you were me, where would you go looking for, and again, if I find, I'm likely going to find Meshay, right? So where do you think they're hiding out at? Where do you think would go? Where would she want to be?
I don't know. The only, and then, like I said, again, I'm not trying to point fingers or anything. Her ex-husband literally took and wouldn't give her back for a couple of days, and we had an issue with that. So
when was that?
This was like sometime last year, maybe.
Kirkland suggested that maybe Meshay's ex-husband had something to do with it. But the police had already visited him and determined that Meshay and Layla weren't with him. And unlike Kirkland, he didn't have an outstanding no-contact order against him.
Fair enough. I'm trying not to get too involved in your other case, right? But like I said, I'm more interested in that little girl, okay? That is, Meshay could be anywhere, right? But I mean, I'm sure you love that little girl like everybody else, right? I mean, that little girl got a lot of family, right?
Two of my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, I'm literally, when Meshay gave her brother a car, I'm the one that got up in the morning to take Layla to school every morning.
And you're kind of soft-spoken. Do you mind if I pull up a chair? Sweet, man.
Because no, I got a lot of shit I'm already dealing with, and this just makes everything worse.
Like what? Like your other cases?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I only had one other case, and I've never ran from it. I've always been at every court date on time. I posted bail, never got in trouble since. This is the most trouble I've been in since.
Kirkland presented himself, if not as an upstanding citizen, then at least one who was trying to do better and was complying with the terms of his past run-ins with the law. But this wasn't true, because there was something else the investigators knew about him, something that made him even more of a suspicious figure.
Where did you live before you lived here?
Arkansas.
Kirkland hadn't left Arkansas just because he longed for the western seaboard. He'd fled another criminal case, this time a murder. In November 2017, a 57-year-old man called Curtis Urquhart went missing in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Earlier that year, he'd been charged with second-degree forgery and theft of property. His body was discovered lying in a ditch by 3 men on December 11th. He'd been shot in the head, and his body had been mutilated by wildlife. He'd last been seen leaving a law office with Kirkland, then 22, on November 27th. This threw Kirkland under suspicion of his murder, and the police brought him in for an interview. Kirkland admitted he'd killed Curtis. That same December, his Google history showed searches for how to get blood out of a car seat, how to beat murder, killing the only witness, and other ways to get away with murder. He'd said he and Curtis had left the notary's office together and driven around. When Curtis had started to demand money from him, Kirkland refused, but Curtis kept insisting, and he said he was scared for his life. He reached under the driver's seat and pulled out a handgun, which he used to shoot Curtis in the head. He then dumped Curtis's body in a ditch and drove away. Kirkland was charged with first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. He was released on $250,000 bond and at some point between 2018 and 2020 moved across the country to Washington State. There, far from obeying the terms of his bail, he continued to violate it. In 2020, Vancouver police investigated him for possession of a stolen semi-automatic handgun. He surrendered it to them, but the following March he lied on an application to buy another semi-automatic handgun, saying he wasn't under indictment for a felony. The application was denied. But he got hold of a gun somehow anyway, because in December 2022, he used it to shoot at Meshay's balcony window. Kirkland's murder charge in Arkansas was still pending, and now the disappearance of a mother and child was connected to his name. On March 17, 2023, the day before Meshay and Layla were reported missing, an Arkansas judge revoked his bail in the murder case. On the 22nd, he appeared in court and admitted he was wanted in Arkansas, but refused to waive extradition to be turned over to the authorities there. The judge ordered that he be held without bail. And that same day, 2 bodies were found.
On Wednesday morning, the Clark County Sheriff's Office got a call from someone who was walking on this rural road in Washougal. The caller described what they believed to be 2 life-sized mannequins down an embankment near a creek. But when deputies arrived on scene, they discovered 2 bodies. Investigators contacted Vancouver police, who determined this was likely Meshay Melendez and Layla Stewart.
They'd both been killed by gunshot wounds to the head. Meshay had been shot once and Layla twice, and Layla had been assaulted. The investigators took this discovery to their interrogation of Kirkland.
Do you think I'm here to judge you?
No.
Do you think I'm here because maybe God put me here?
You're here to do your job.
Yeah. And what do you think that job is?
To find them.
To find them, right? Do you think maybe I have found them?
No.
You don't know?
I hope not.
You hope not?
I hope not in the way you think. I hope not in the way that I think you decide to say.
What do you think I'm about to say? Kirkland?
Just tell me you're okay.
I can't tell you that.
That's all I need to hear. Just
What do you think? Okay. Where do you think they are?
I don't know.
Kirkland, I'm here to ask about what actually happened. And I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you if I didn't think that maybe you'd want to talk about it.
I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything?
No, sir.
So what did happen?
I don't know. I don't know where they are.
You don't know where they are?
I've been calling and calling.
I get it. Do you think that maybe that might be some denial?
No, sir.
Kirkland?
I've made my mistake before.
Okay, fair enough, man. I'm not here to about past stuff.
I don't run from it.
Then tell me about what happened to that baby.
I don't know.
You do know.
I don't.
Kirkland, I don't want to go down the road with all the stuff that I have on my phone. I want to hear it from a man. You're a man, right?
I am.
You're a man that maybe made a mistake, not a monster?
Not a monster.
Okay.
I made my mistakes in the past.
So tell me about the mistake that happened.
The one in Arkansas?
No, I don't. Not about that, man. Tell me about this baby.
I don't know.
Kirkland tried to bring the conversation back to his past charges, including the murder in Arkansas. But he'd already confessed to that. This was something new, and it displayed eerily similar hallmarks to the killing of Curtis Urquhart. They'd been shot in the head like Curtis and left in a ditch also like Curtis.
I was there. I was at the scene. I know what road you were off of. I know why there's mud on your car. I know why there's tire tracks down that little road that goes up where you turned around and went back. I know all that stuff. I don't need to know if you did it. Everyone wants to know why. And I think a man like you would at least give people the peace of mind of to at least know why.
I didn't do anything.
The investigator urged him to confess, but he refused.
But this is your opportunity to at least tell your family why.
Done talking. I told you I didn't know anything. We can go with an attorney from there.
He asked for his attorney. But even without a confession, the evidence was mounting that he'd had something to do with Meshay and Layla's murders. On March 13th and 15th, he texted a friend asking if she knew of secluded local areas like woods or a place where he could bury a gun. On the 15th, he also transferred $4,200 from Meshay's bank account to his own using her phone. He texted another friend on March 18th saying, "I need to get rid of this stolo," which is slang for a stolen car. It was possible he was referring to the Charger that Meshay and Layla had last been seen in. On a search of this car, the police discovered shell casings, a large blue tarp, and both Meshay and Layla's blood. It seemed certain that they'd been killed in his car. They talked to the friend that Meshay and Kirkland had been staying with on the night of the 11th. This friend, Joe, said that they'd both left the house at about 5 a.m. March 12th, saying they were going out to make some money. Kirkland came back in his car at about 8 a.m., blasting loud music with Meshay in the passenger seat. She was naked from the waist down and seemed to be passed out. Joe reached into the car to turn the music down, and Kirkland shouted at her to close the car door. But she didn't suspect something was amiss. Fatefully, she handed Layla and Layla's kitten Rocky over to Kirkland, and Kirkland drove off. Kirkland often took Layla to school, and she trusted him like a father. When she got into his car that morning, she would have no idea what was coming, and no idea that her mom was already dead in the front seat. Her life had so much promise as a 6-year-old child, and it was cruelly snatched away.
And Layla had a little kitten named Rocky. That night, pictures of her, she had a kitten on her shirt. She loved cats. And when Joanna Cardinal put her in the defendant's car, she had Rocky with her. And it's our hope that Rocky was the last thing that she saw at the time in which she passed this earth.
The loss of Layla has left a void in my heart that can never be filled. Every day, I wake up with the pain, knowing that my little girl will never grow up.
Our family has been torn apart by grief and the endless questions that haunt us every day. Why?
He a 7-year-old and then shot her and killed her.
You have judges that let him out, should never have let him out. You have a district attorney who gave him bail. Why would you give somebody bail who has this kind of a history?
With all the evidence mounting, Kirkland had to change his story. He then claimed that he'd given Meshay a pistol to use to protect herself in her line of work, about which he was vague. He said that on that fateful morning they'd been arguing in the car about his second cell phone, and she'd fumbled with her gun during the conversation. She'd accidentally shot her daughter twice and then herself. This was what he claimed. But why try to hide the bodies? And it would be some coincidence with the facts of the case so closely resembling the 2017 murder of Curtis Urquhart. Ultimately, Kirkland Warren had no choice but to plead guilty. He admitted to the murders of Layla and Meshay, and he entered an Alford plea to a charge of assaulting Layla. This plea allowed him to maintain his innocence, but functioned as a guilty plea in sentencing. For these crimes, he was sentenced to life in prison.
I can't even make any more memories. The 7 years was all I had. And it's all because of Kirkland Warren. And I want him to suffer every single day.
Meshay's family questions why he was allowed out on bail for the domestic violence charge when he had a murder case standing against him.
The trouble is when we have a legal system with district attorneys and judges, they are horribly undertrained in domestic violence. They know laws, but they don't know a perpetrator, they don't know the characteristics of a perpetrator, and they don't know what they do to a victim.
He also pleaded guilty to Curtis's murder. His sentence for this 7-year-old crime will run concurrently with the life sentence handed down for the killing of Layla and Meshay. And though Arkansas is a death penalty state, that punishment has been taken off the table. It was abolished in Washington state in 2023. The motive for the murders remains unknown, though his interference in Meshay's accounts and his theft scheme involving his wife Monet suggest it was potentially financial. Monet pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree theft and 2 counts of attempted identity theft, and was sentenced to 2 years probation. Kirkland Warren now begins his life sentence. But the Clark County community is angry, and Meshay and Layla's family won't ever move on.
From the family to the larger community, this tragic case has brought many tears. At a vigil at Vancouver's Esther Short Park the weekend after Meshay and Layla's bodies were found, hundreds came out to remember and honor them, including Layla's classmates.
We really want to honor the family and make sure they get lots of support for that Layla and her mom is gone.
Close friends with Layla and Meshay. Layla was pretty much my niece. So yeah, this has been very heartbreaking. We hope something changes. We hope that if a victim comes out and they're scared, that the police do way more than what they did for her.
What do you think about this tragic story? Could Meshay and Layla's killings have been prevented? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. June 20th, 2019. A worried father calls the Salt Lake City Police Department from his home in California.
Yeah, I'd like to get, if possible, have a wellness check done on my daughter. I've been trying to get a hold of her all week. I was just wondering if I could have somebody maybe go by her house and check on her.
Mackenzie Lueck, a 23-year-old college student, had just returned to Salt Lake City after spending a week at home for a family funeral. Her last text to her mother was simple: "Landed. Love you, Mama." There was no hint that it might be her final message. When her parents dropped her off at the airport, they expected to see her again when the semester ended. But Mackenzie never made it home after her late-night flight, and as days passed without contact, their worst fears began to unfold.
Last time we heard from her, she got off the plane coming back from LA. It was 1 a.m. She was going to grab an Uber and go home, but that's the last I've heard from her.
So 1 a.m. this morning?
No, 1 a.m. Monday morning. So we've been trying to get a hold of her all week. Usually it's unlike her to return a call, but it goes straight to voicemails.
Mackenzie, a dedicated student, was now missing. The investigation that followed would unravel a chilling mystery. CCTV footage, phone records, and police interrogations revealing the brutal fate that she met in the early hours of June 17th. Join us at The Decoder as we trace the timeline of Mackenzie Lueck's final moments and uncover the truth behind her tragic disappearance. This case takes us to Salt Lake City, the capital of Utah. With a violent crime rate of 9.79 per 1,000 residents, Salt Lake City has a crime rate higher than that of Mackenzie's native Los Angeles by 1 in 1,000. But no one expects that 1 in 1,000 to make a difference, and no one expects to be that one. Mackenzie was in Salt Lake City to finish her studies at the University of Utah, just 2 semesters away from earning her degree. Living with 2 roommates, her life seemed typical for a college student. But after a flight back from California, where she attended the funeral of her grandmother, her communication stopped cold. Her parents, Diane and Greg Lueck, had grown increasingly anxious after their last message from Mackenzie. Diane didn't see the text until she woke up the next morning, and when she responded, she noticed something strange. Her reply wasn't delivered through iMessage. It had gone through as a regular SMS. Mackenzie's phone was offline. At first, the Luecks brushed it off, but as time stretched on and their calls continued going straight to voicemail, worry crept in.
Please record your message.
By June 20th, after hearing from none of Mackenzie's friends or roommates, her parents decided to act.
And does anyone have a key?
I don't know. The landlord may. I don't know of anybody that would be there besides the roommates that would have a key. You know what? I take that back. She said she dropped one behind the mailbox, but she could never get it out. So there may be one back there. Somebody can fish it out, but I don't know if she ever got it out or not.
The police's first step was to carry out a wellness check at Mackenzie's address in Salt Lake City, on the assumption that she'd made it back there from the airport.
You know where your landlord lives? Does he live on the premises, or how we can get a hold of him to maybe get a key or something like that if we need it? Yes, the key to the apartment so that we might be able to go in there just in case she is in there injured or something like that.
They tried to contact the landlord, but received no reply.
I don't think University of Utah is going to give us any information. Like, we could probably call up there and see if she's supposed to be in a class. Yeah, she's enrolled. They could go check her classes to see if she's there, but this is her car. And landlord's not answering his phone, so I just left him a message.
Eventually, one of Mackenzie's roommates let them into the house. He said that Mackenzie had asked him to take care of her cat while she was in California, and that she'd said she was returning to Salt Lake City that week, but he didn't know exactly when. On a search of the property, the police didn't find the suitcase Mackenzie had traveled with. Her car was still in the driveway, and there were no signs of foul play. The implication was clear. She'd never made it home. There were other concerning signs. She hadn't been seen in class all week, and she was due to submit an online midterm exam by midnight that night, June 20th, and she hadn't yet logged into the portal. Alongside school, Mackenzie worked at a biological testing company, and her colleagues there couldn't confirm that she'd turned up to work since going to California. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the airport at the time her flight was scheduled to land, 1:35 in the morning. She was listed on the manifest, meaning that she had indeed gotten on the flight as planned, which aligned with her text to her mom upon landing. And the police managed to pick her out on CCTV leaving the airport and getting into a Lyft car at 2:40 a.m. Meanwhile, Greg was doing his own investigation into his daughter's life, looking for any clues as to her whereabouts. Mackenzie shared her bank accounts with her parents, and upon looking into them, Greg found an unusual transaction dated June 10th in the amount of $300. And lately, she hadn't been asking her parents to assist her with tuition payments or rent, and she'd recently bought new furniture. Greg didn't know where this money came from, if it was just her earnings from the biological testing company job, or if it came from somewhere else. Mackenzie's brother knew that she had been seeing men through the Tinder app, and that she might have a boyfriend who lived in Park City, but he didn't know this possible boyfriend's name. Nonetheless, it was a lead. One of her sorority sisters also corroborated that she'd been seeing men through Tinder and said Mackenzie had confessed a desire to become a stripper.
I think she was trying to almost gain confidence and security in herself. I think she realized she was really shy and she wanted to be more outgoing and meet people.
Greg contacted AT&T to look into Mackenzie's phone records. On June 17th, between 1:50 and 1:58 a.m., so after Mackenzie had landed in Salt Lake City, she had texted one number 8 times. The content of these messages was not available, which meant it could be a lead or just a dead end. Maybe this was just Mackenzie ordering her rideshare. The police listed Mackenzie as a missing person and sent a text message to her number saying, "You are an adult and have the right to not communicate with whomever you want. I simply need to verify your safety. We will not communicate your location or anything else unless you give us permission. Please give me a call."
Mackenzie Lueck's family and friends trying to reach her on social media. They posted this video hoping she might see it.
Everyone is out looking for you around the country, and they all want you to know that we're advocating for you, we're fighting for you, and we're going to bring you home.
In cases like these, with a young person reported missing, it wasn't unusual for them simply to have run off, needing some time away from everything. Mackenzie's family could only hope that this was the case.
You know, she might be upset, but come and just call somebody and say, "I'm fine, quit looking for me."
One thing that we wanted to talk about is she texted her family that she landed at the airport. She wouldn't have done that if she wanted to purposefully disappear.
On June 21st, the police widened the investigation to Mackenzie's known connections. They uncovered an ex-boyfriend who dated Mackenzie until April 2018. He told them that a few weeks after the relationship had ended, she'd sent him a Snapchat video of her having sex with 2 other people, and he'd blocked her. One of Mackenzie's sorority sisters had something interesting to say, that Mackenzie had had a job interview lined up at Exotic Kitty, which was a gentleman's club. The investigators also spoke to one of her male friends who said that he and Mackenzie had been casually dating on and off since September 2018, but had never been exclusive, and had had plans to meet up when Mackenzie got back from California. This friend said that Mackenzie was a regular sugar baby, meaning she connected with men, sugar daddies, who would give her gifts and money. This was maybe her mystery source of income. She used the dating app Tinder as well as the site Seeking Arrangement for this purpose. The site's homepage reads, "Seeking Arrangement delivers a new way for relationships to form and grow. Sugar babies and sugar daddies or mamas both get what they want, when they want it." Mackenzie had last logged into this website on June 16th, a few hours before her disappearance. The friend also told police that she'd connected with a guy on Tinder about 3 weeks ago, but didn't know any details about the mystery man.
I have no idea what happened to her, where she is. Nobody does, and it's pretty terrifying.
A mixed picture of Mackenzie was emerging, a side to her life that her parents hadn't known anything about. Born on March 8, 1996 in the beachside LA suburb of El Segundo, she was the second of her parents' 4 children and their only daughter. At high school, she was on the swim and water polo teams and helped to start a club for breast cancer awareness. She continued her feminist thinking at the University of Utah, where she was a positive and supportive sisterly presence in her sorority, Alpha Chi Omega. The sorority's charity work focused on domestic violence awareness and prevention, and on Facebook, Mackenzie posted to celebrate the anniversary of women's suffrage. She'd had a difficult year, as according to one friend, she'd been sexually assaulted in 2018 and was having a hard time dealing with it, seeing a therapist and taking medication for depression. Mackenzie was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Salt Lake City is the faith's headquarters. Mackenzie wasn't devout, however, and enjoyed going out to bars with her friends, and apparently meeting men on Tinder. She'd also recently come out to her family as bisexual, though her friends and family weren't aware of any women she was seeing. She came from a healthcare background, with her dad Greg working in healthcare logistics and administration. Mackenzie herself was majoring in pre-nursing and kinesiology, the study of human movement. She hoped to go to nursing or medical school after her graduation, planned for May 2020, but she'd never make it to graduation.
Over the last couple days, I've spoken with Greg Lueck. I can feel the heartache and the pain and the suffering in his voice as we spoke. And my commitment to Greg was that we would do everything within our power, the Salt Lake City Police Department, to bring Mackenzie home.
Eventually, the police managed to track down the details of the Lyft ride Mackenzie had taken from the airport. Information in her email inbox showed she'd been picked up at 2:40 a.m. on June 17th, and then dropped off at 16 East Center Street, North Salt Lake at 2:59 a.m., 19 minutes later. This location was a park, Hatch Park, with several buildings nearby. There was no obvious reason for Mackenzie to be there.
Confirmed that this was the location where she was last seen, Hatch Park, here in North Salt Lake. Investigators now revealing she met someone else after getting dropped off.
Detectives have spoken with the Lyft driver and learned that Mackenzie was met at Hatch Park by an individual in a vehicle. Mackenzie did not appear to be in any type of distress.
On the 25th, we learned about a disturbing problem with the cameras at Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, which could have filmed Mackenzie getting in that car the morning of June 17th.
Hatch Park doesn't have any cameras. We have some dummy cameras.
Meanwhile, the police had opened a tip line, and it was flooded with information. People reported sightings of Mackenzie in the company of various men, including one on June 21st in a liquor store. The witness claimed to have seen her buying alcohol with a white man and described her as wearing a white shirt with jeans and having a tattoo on her arms above each elbow, one with words and the other with an arrow. Mackenzie did indeed have tattoos, but not these tattoos. Rather, she had a tattoo of a star on her back. These false sightings muddied the waters and made it difficult to determine when the last sighting of Mackenzie actually was. Had she been wandering around Salt Lake City all week? Or was that fateful Lyft ride to the park in North Salt Lake the last moment before something terrible? The only one who could meaningfully answer this question was the Lyft driver. Lyft's privacy policies meant that investigators had to get a search warrant to access Mackenzie's account details, and by the time they spoke to the person who had driven her that fateful night, it was June 22nd, and she had been officially missing for 2 days. When they questioned the driver, he said he dropped Mackenzie as planned at the park in North Salt Lake, where she'd been picked up by a friend in a car that looked like a Subaru.
I remember I was actually going to turn off my my app and go home, but right then I got another order to go pick somebody up downtown. So I just went to go pick up that person. They seemed to know each other really well, because I think all I heard was, "How are you doing? How are your trip?" Just kind of basic greetings. The situation seemed very safe. She obviously knew the person that she was getting into the car with.
None of Mackenzie's friends had come forward to say they'd picked her up that night, though her status as missing was widely reported. Her other friends were speaking on the news.
Where could she have gone? Her car has not been moved. Things are adding up.
Meanwhile, time since Mackenzie's disappearance was stretching on. She'd been booked on a flight back to LA on June 23rd for a family wedding, and the police met the plane to determine if she was on it, but she wasn't. And when her bank records were produced under subpoena, they discovered she hadn't made any transactions since the Lyft payment in the early hours of June 17th. So whatever had happened to her had likely happened that very same night, possibly at Hatch Park. The investigators set up a geofence for the area of Hatch Park in the early hours of June 17th, which registered 6 devices entering that vicinity in the time frame. One device pinged several times in the area, a device belonging neither to Mackenzie nor the Lyft driver. It belonged instead to a man named Ayoola Ajayi. Ayoola's phone had pinged in the same area as Mackenzie's right before 3 a.m., when Mackenzie's phone was turned off between 2:58 and 2:59 a.m. More damningly, phone records showed that Mackenzie and Ayoola had been having conversations over the TextMe app. This was enough for the police to apply for a search warrant of Ayoola's residence. On June 25th, the police made contact with him. Though his lawyer advised him not to, he sat down willingly with the police. He claimed he only wanted to clear up a mistake.
You're not under arrest, you're not being detained, you can leave anytime you want to, okay?
It just doesn't make sense. I want to get to the root of it too.
Yeah.
Because when you said my IP is showing, that means something is wrong.
AJ worked in IT, meaning he understood the significance of his geolocation and the way they triangulated his proximity to Mackenzie on the night she disappeared. He claimed he wanted to clear up any confusion, and he mentioned his alibi right out of the starting gate.
So, I have security camera in front of the house, and then I have one inside the house. So that's my baby mama. She was with me on that day. So according to the video, she was with me.
He said his baby mama's first name was Michelle and that he didn't know her last name. She was 8 months pregnant with his child, but they weren't together. AJ seemed to feel guilt, however, about using the seeking arrangements site.
So I have PTSD and anxiety. I just need to talk to someone whenever I'm alone and I'm freaking out.
So this is a seeking arrangement website?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I go through the whole everything. I can't see anyone that matched that profile and that matched that picture.
Okay.
But if you see, you can see most of them are in Seattle, Ogden, everywhere around the world.
Okay.
So I never even try to meet them. I just need someone to talk to whenever I'm freaking out, so to calm down. So even some of them are in Washington, D.C. And one in Logan. So all we just do is to talk. And if I met her from there, I'm positive that I probably don't want to meet her because all this is not revealed to my baby mama, and I don't want her to know about it, so I never meet any of them.
He couldn't deny that he'd been using the website since the investigators had concrete evidence. He did, however, deny meeting Mackenzie through the site. But why had they texted outside of the site on June 16th, only 9 hours before she went missing? AJ claimed that she must have found his phone number on his profile and texted him the question mark to ask if he was interested.
So you're still saying that that's the only text, that's the only messages you got from her, right?
That I can remember. So, but for her to just send me a question mark, so there's a possibility that I've talked to her in the past.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you did this or you were involved in it at all. I'm just saying that someone at your house or someone was using your IP address, that's all.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it.
I would like to do that because I'm freaking out already. I have anxiety and I have PTSD, so that's why I've been calling you, like, please let me help if any way I can help. Even my lawyer don't want me to come here right now.
He claimed he didn't save numbers in his phone, and so he didn't recall if he'd talked to Mackenzie before. When she asked for a photo, he sent her a selfie, and she never responded to it.
So earlier you said we could take your phone and download it. Are you still willing to do that or no?
I just need to call my lawyer and see if it's okay. Because I want to help as much as I can.
Sure.
But she's saying that some police just want to pin it on someone that they can pin it on me.
AJ said he downloaded all the online evidence the police wanted, including the footage from his home security camera, which he claimed placed him at home all the early hours of June 17th, but wasn't willing to hand it over.
AJ, the only reason, you can understand if this was your sister or something, or your mom, we'd be working just as hard to find her for you, okay? This family is in that same boat. We just want to do everything we can, and just because you've chatted with her, you've texted back and forth twice or however many times, and it's bouncing off your IP address, we just want to cross every avenue, make sure that people aren't involved, people who are staying with you, people might be parked outside your house using your Wi-Fi. We just want to make sure.
AJ excused the coincidences as best he could. He wasn't under arrest. However, at the end of the interview, police confiscated his cell phones before allowing him to leave. And on the following day, they executed a search warrant at his house.
I have the search warrant in hand. Can I borrow your phone then to call my lawyer?
He was broadly cooperative, but he questioned why they confiscated his phone as evidence. They then proceeded to search the house.
Hello? Salt Lake Police, can you come out, please?
They found another occupant of the house, a guest who was staying in AJ's spare bedroom through an Airbnb booking.
Hi, it's the police department.
Okay.
Are you renting this room?
Yes.
Okay. We are going to be serving a warrant on this house, so we need... Is there anyone else here?
Just me.
If you want to just grab your wallet.
I got it in my wallet.
Okay, we'll need you to come out then.
Okay.
He'd only arrived from the airport that morning and had no idea why the police were suddenly conducting a search on his host's house. Other than this guest, there was no one in the house, and there was no sign of Mackenzie.
House clear, just the one Airbnb guy in the whole place.
The police told AJ he was free to leave.
You're free to leave. I'm not detaining you, so you can leave whenever you want.
You want to check in Friday?
You got it crazy?
No, I just don't want you guys to use anything when I'm gone because I gave them my phone and they used that against me before. So I just want to make sure that you guys approve everything before I do it.
You're free to leave when you want. Any idea where you want to go?
I don't even know. I don't have my phone or my card, so I have no destination.
Okay. Again, and I don't have a time frame, right? Like, I don't know if so.
Could be 10 minutes, could be a little bit longer.
Yeah, so
I would assume you'd want to be here.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have. You're sitting right there. I have no problem with you sitting in the shade on the porch if you want to. Like, that looks miserable.
Yeah, if you guys have my phone without my permission, and if you guys they give it to you guys when you are here, and I can see what you guys are doing with it, that would make more sense. But they took it with them. I don't know what's going on.
And I don't either.
So I just think that's not fair.
AJ left, he said, to go to the local library. Undercover officers followed him and learned that he didn't go to the library. He went to a Smith's grocery and the bank inside it. There, he bought a pay-as-you-go cell phone. A few hours later, after having gathered the evidence at the house, the police came to detain him.
What's going on, man?
Detectives are ready to talk to you about everything that's going on real fast, so if you want to come, I'll give you a ride back to the house real quick.
But there's Fox News over there.
I know, I'm going to drive you back in my car. It's a Camry, so...
We'll stay away from the news.
Yeah, we're not going to go by the news.
I don't want my face on the news.
I will do that so it does, okay? So stand up real quick.
We're just going to... Oh, are you arresting me or something?
No. Stand up.
Then why you're going to be detained for a little bit.
You're being detained, but just for a second, okay? I got to put you in handcuffs just while we're driving.
Per policy, we're just going to go talk to detectives for a little bit.
The police confiscated his new cell phone as evidence. It was 7 days after Mackenzie was reported missing, and 10 days after the last sighting of her alive. So what did the police find at AJ's residence that was damning enough for them to detain him? They found multiple knives, a hammer, and a gun. In his car, they found dirt and debris. They also discovered a lot of electronics, including a router and a Wi-Fi mesh system. All these electronic items, including AJ's phones and computer, would be forensically examined.
Our detectives collected multiple items of evidence throughout the night that are in the process of being tested and analyzed. This will take some time.
But the most telling evidence wasn't technological at all. The investigators found a freshly dug patch of earth in the back of AJ's yard and heard from his neighbors that on June 17th, he'd been burning something there that had given off a foul smell.
The smell of gas was outrageous. And I thought maybe I was in my bedroom and I smelled it through my window and I thought maybe it was my motorhome. And so I came outside to make sure, and there's this smell in the air that was just almost rancid. It was just really disgusting smelling.
A canine unit was brought in to search for human remains, and the dog detected something.
Tara Chatterton says she was hired to clean the house, but quit after just 1 day after discovering it bristled with cameras.
How many cameras did he have in the house, and where were they placed?
I figured around 8 to 10.
Wow.
But there was one in every single room for sure, but there was several in the master bedroom.
And where were the cameras facing in the master bedroom?
Towards the bed.
She says the accused killer specifically asked her to bring her 12-year-old daughter Cherish with her when she cleaned the house. Tara says AJ had a certain charm, but reminded her of notorious serial killer Ted Bundy.
I just knew in my gut that I should not go back. I could just feel it. I just knew that there was something wrong with it.
So they interviewed AJ a second time, and this time they stopped being so empathetic. The police pushed him on the limits of coincidence. The locations of his phone and Mackenzie's was an accident, he argued, or a mistake. He kept his Wi-Fi open without password protection for the sake of his Airbnb guests. This was why there was confusion around his IP address being used. So he said,
AJ, I just told you that your phone records and the location put you up at the meet. Do you think, honestly, and expect me to believe that you ended that conversation and somehow you and her location end up in the exact same spot?
Oh, I'm not doubting you. If I see that too, if I'm in your case, I would be asking myself, what are you asking me right now?
It's not a miraculous question.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
Stuff doesn't just happen.
No.
Yes, I agree with you.
I'm telling you to explain that. And so far, you have not.
Well, how do I explain something I don't know?
Are you saying you don't know or you don't remember? Because those are two different things, AJ.
He had no answer on this supposed coincidence, and he wasn't convincing. When the interview ended, the police had confirmed some things, that AJ had used the seeking arrangements site and that he'd talked to Mackenzie over text. But AJ hadn't confessed to anything more incriminating. He insisted he'd been home on the night of the 16th and the morning of the 17th, and he claimed he'd never met Mackenzie in person. He did confess to having lit a fire in his backyard on the 17th, but said he'd put it out as soon as a neighbor told him he wasn't allowed to be burning things because of pollution restrictions and that he needed to call the fire department. This same neighbor told the police that the fire had smelled like nothing she'd ever smelled before and that she'd told him to call the fire department or she would. AJ said he'd only been burning some trash and maybe some clothes, but he insisted the clothes were his own. He explained the dirt and debris in the floor of his car as the result of recent work on his yard, saying he'd recently planted 20 or so flowers and the debris was from the fertilizer. Apparently, he was also in the habit of killing goats for food and burning them instead of skinning them, but he hadn't done that for a while. This, according to AJ, was the explanation for any blood they might find in the bottom of the fridge in his garage. But it was not goat remains they found in his backyard. No, instead they found a human bone, charred muscle tissue, and part of a human scalp with hair. There was also a cell phone. AJ's fire had not been a simple exercise in burning trash. It had been disposal of evidence.
This is one of the most difficult phone calls I've ever made, as both Greg and his wife Diana were devastated and heartbroken by this news.
AJ's car smelled strongly of gas, and they discovered a red gas can that looked identical to the one he'd been seen purchasing at 9 a.m. on June 17th, the morning after Mackenzie's disappearance. There was also surveillance evidence of AJ's car in those fateful early hours. In this footage, AJ's Kia can be seen heading towards Hatch Park at 2:48 a.m. At 2:59 a.m., the white lift vehicle drives away from the park, and about 10 seconds later, so does AJ's Kia. Only now, Mackenzie was in it. Following the interview, the police had released AJ and he went to stay with a friend, but it wouldn't be for long. The physical evidence against him was mounting, and early on June 28th, the samples from his backyard were confirmed to match Mackenzie Lueck's DNA, and the police were prepared to detain Ayoola Ajayi on suspicion of murder. A SWAT team was deployed to the friend's apartment where AJ was staying. Meanwhile, one of the officers called him to encourage him to surrender.
AJ, you're being a little bit unreasonable, dude. I'm a man, you're a man, or a grown man.
If you want to arrest me, I would come down, and you can arrest me. I will be there. I can see your car. I would come down.
Okay, come on down then.
You're not trying to... Are you planning to arrest me?
Will you come down, please?
No, only if you tell me that you want to arrest me, then
I'm not arresting you. No, I'm not. No. I am not. You just come down.
If you're not trying to arrest me, then I don't want to talk to you.
If I'm not trying to arrest you, then you don't want to talk to me?
Yes.
What if I was trying to arrest you? Do you want to come down and talk to me?
Sure.
Okay, I'm trying to arrest you. Come down and talk to me.
Do you have your arrest warrant with you?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
The officer called AJ's bluff. AJ came downstairs and the SWAT team arrested him without incident.
We are filing charges of aggravated murder, aggravated kidnapping, and desecration of a body in the homicide of Mackenzie Lueck. The man charged is Ayoola Adese Achaya. I will not be saying the killer's name again.
So who actually was Ayoola Ajayi, and what did he have to do with Mackenzie Lueck? Born in 1988, AJ was raised in Nigeria but had lived in Utah since at least 2009, when he'd started at Utah State University on a student visa. He'd returned to the university 3 separate times, but never earned his degree. He'd also been with the Utah National Guard from 2014 to 2015, when he was discharged with an entry-level separation. He did not complete basic training and didn't receive any certificates, leaving him ineligible to be employed on any tours of duty. He was discharged for medical reasons, potentially glaucoma. However, his LinkedIn page, which has since been taken down, listed that he was an IT specialist for the U.S. Army from 2014 to 2016, and that he had experience working in IT for Dell, Goldman Sachs, and Microsoft. He had attempted to start a modeling career, describing himself on his model management page as tall, buffed, funny. I am a victim, romantic, violent, and character actor.
Evie Keener owns a modeling and talent agency in Salt Lake City that represents dozens of beautiful young women. Evie says she met the accused killer here in Salt Lake City, Utah, at a networking event for models and their agents last summer. She says the suspect approached her about signing with her modeling agency, but she says there was something about him that creeped her out.
On the surface, he seemed perfect. He seemed very smart, very good looking.
But after attending several networking parties, 31-year-old Ayoola Ajayi began reaching out to Evie on social media. She instinctively sensed danger.
He wanted to sign on with my agency, and I did not feel comfortable having him in the same room with my young models. So I just listened to my gut, and I didn't have anything further to do with him.
AJ self-published a book on Amazon in 2018 called Forge Identity. It was a fictional story about a boy witnessing a friend and neighbor be burned alive by a violent mob. It was suggested that this book was based on a true story. He was also married to a woman named Tanisha Ajayi, who lived in Dallas, Texas.
I first met him, he was a sweet person, he was a good person. He used to send me money down here for my kids.
They'd met through a family friend and got married when he was 23 and she was 27. They'd never lived together, and she hadn't spoken to him in years.
I just stopped talking to him because that was like free from my life. The stuff that he was doing, it was changing my life.
According to Tanisha, AJ had lost his temper when she refused to come to Utah to live with him and threatened to kill her if she wouldn't.
Because he threatened me, and I have kids to live for. He got aggressive, and he was saying that he was going to kidnap me. I just left him alone.
She said he once tried to tie her up with a phone cord, and she had to jump through a window to escape.
I was trying to get out the window. We was at his friend's house, and he closed the window down, and I jumped through the window, and he had a butcher knife. He was trying to stab me with the knife. I was trying to grab the knife out his hand because he was trying to stab me in my hand, but I had to try to grab the knife out his hand, and it cut me. I had all these cuts.
AJ refused to sign divorce papers, and as a result, they remained married. This wasn't the only violent blip in AJ's past. Though he had no convictions on his record, he'd been investigated for a sex offense in 2014 and again in March 2018, just over a year before Mackenzie's disappearance, when he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman he met on a dating app.
This is the back door leading down to the basement, where a contractor says the suspect asked him to build a soundproof room, complete with a secret door, hooks on the concrete wall, and also a fingerprint lock.
Investigations into Mackenzie's phone showed
Brian Wolf could only sit and watch as police announced the end of the search for Mackenzie Lueck.
Holy crap.
All week on the news, he kept seeing pictures of a house that he was just inside a couple months ago. Now he sees the mugshot of the man he met inside.
I've never ever had anybody ask me anything like this. 100% that man that they arrested is the man I met, guaranteed. I'm shaking right now. My heart's pounding. I'm almost about to cry. It's scary. I feel sorry for that girl.
He says murder suspect Ayoola Ajayi
We just said to put his name down as AJ.
wanted him to build a secret soundproof room in the basement right here with a thumbprint lock and hooks hanging from the walls.
Just said that his girlfriend was coming into town and needed to get it done before she got there because she was a Mormon girl. She didn't know he drank, so he wanted to hide her alcohol from her. And I was like, well, why do you need it to be soundproof? I told a lot of people that I thought something weird was going on over there, and it turns out there obviously was. He was adamant about getting it done really fast, and money was no object, and he needed to get it done before his girlfriend came into town.
He says he still isn't sure what AJ actually wanted the room for.
Well, I could totally do it, but I never would have done it. There's no way.
But whatever it was, he refused to be a part of it.
I just had a gut feeling that the room he wanted built wasn't appropriate for anything. It wasn't something where somebody would want to be in that room alone with him. And even my nephew, when we got out to the truck, we both looked at each other and was like, that was weird, right? And he was like, yeah, that was hella weird. We're not doing this job, right? And I was like, hell no.
AJ's history only heightened suspicion, and further searches of his property uncovered damning evidence. The police found clothing with bleach and bloodstains on it, as well as a bloodied shower curtain. AJ was already under arrest for her murder, but they still had to find her body. And once again, it would be AJ's phone records that proved the key, placing him at Logan Canyon on June 25th. A scenic location popular with hikers, climbers, and skiers, it was an hour and 20 minutes drive from Salt Lake City, and remote enough that it registered as a likely place for AJ to have disposed of Mackenzie's remains. On July 2nd, the investigators began a search of this area. It was on July 3rd, just after midday, that they made a breakthrough, the horrifying discovery of human remains. It was Mackenzie's body, just as they'd feared. She was buried in a shallow grave covered with some brush. Her hands had been zip-tied behind her back, and her body was partially burned. There was blunt force trauma to the head, and her killer had made an attempt to bury her body, but not well enough. Finally, on July 10th, Ayoola was formally charged with aggravated murder, aggravated kidnapping, obstructing justice, and desecration of a human body. What he'd done to Mackenzie Lueck was both awful and awfully simple. He'd arranged to meet with her after connecting on the Seeking Arrangements site back in 2018. They agreed to meet up after Mackenzie got back from California, and she had her Lyft driver drop her off at Hatch Park. She even acknowledged the strangeness of this to her Lyft driver. Making small talk, they commented on something being strange, and she said, "Not as strange as where you are dropping me off in the middle of a park so late at night." But this was according to her plan with AJ, who would pick her up there and take her to his house. And that's what he did, but she couldn't have known what he really planned. When they got to his house, he tied her hands behind her back with zip ties and started to choke her with his hands. When this wasn't enough to kill her, he used a belt and hit her on the side of the head. According to the autopsy, it was this blow that ultimately killed her. On June 17th, he attempted to burn her body in his backyard, but was prevented by his neighbor, who questioned the smell. Instead, he buried Mackenzie there and threw some of her belongings into the Jordan River. They were later recovered on the bank of the river. These included her student ID for the University of Utah and some items of her clothing, such as her bra, which had burn marks on it. The police visited him for the first time on June 24th. On the next day, June 25th, he dug her body up and moved it to Logan Canyon in the hope it wouldn't be found there. But even this IT worker had underestimated the digital traces he would leave. And he had indeed been trying to cover his tracks, even from the beginning. Because this wasn't a sexual encounter turned suddenly sour. This was premeditated. AJ's home was full of security cameras, but he turned them off before leaving to meet Mackenzie. He wasn't shy about recording his sexual encounters. No, he turned them off because he had a far darker purpose in mind. He did the same when he moved Mackenzie's body, turning his home security cameras off for the duration of the time his cell phone was triangulated heading to Logan Canyon and back on June 25th, between 2:30 and 4:30 p.m. He also tried to give away a mattress on a resale website, presumably the mattress on which he'd murdered Mackenzie, eventually giving it to a woman who later recognized AJ on the news as the man who'd given it to her. His digital footprint had caught up with him, and he'd have to face the consequences. During the search of his electronic devices, the police had allegedly discovered pornographic imagery of minors.
Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill says 31-year-old Ayoola Ajayi sexually assaulted another woman in March of 2018. A court document states Ajayi invited the woman over for dinner. After the two ate while watching TV, the woman alleges Ajayi sexually assaulted her, causing significant pain.
He was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, but these charges were later dropped. On October 7, 2020, AJ pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree desecration of a human body.
Are you entering your guilty pleas today of your own free will and choice?
Guilty, Your Honor. In exchange, the prosecutors took the death penalty off the table. He was instead sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. He was also charged with the 2018 kidnapping and assault of the woman he'd met on Tinder, who'd come forward when his name was released in the news in connection with Mackenzie's death. For this, he was sentenced to a further 1 to 15 years in prison.
The man accused of killing University of Utah student Mackenzie Lueck last year is now selling his home.
This house has gone up for sale, and after what happened last summer, they'll always look at this house differently.
Every time I come by, you can't help but remember what happened there.
And even though the neighborhood has quieted down in the 8 months since this house became a crime scene for murder, for neighbors, this home will always be different.
There's a black mark in your mind when you look at the house that kind of just reminds you that something horrible happened. I was really surprised that it was for sale because I was under the understanding that they wanted to keep it rented to make funds to help pay the defense.
The listing online shows Ajayi wants $349,000 for the 1,800 square foot house. Investment opportunity, the description says. Cutest house on the block. The listing realtor declined to comment. For neighbors, this home will always be different, but Scott hopes the next owner will help change that.
Some new life, some positive energy and positive activity going on there. That would make, a change.
I did talk with the man who is currently renting the home. He said that he rented it from someone who's managing the property for Ayoola Ajayi. He did say that they disclosed to him what had happened there before he rented the home.
What happened was awful. I mean, it's a terrible case. I chose to not look at police reports, even though they said I could look at them if I wanted to.
But it was hard to miss today's news.
Mr. Ajayi burned Ms. Lueck's body, her clothing, and her belongings in an attempt to dispose of evidence of her murder.
Why Kenzie? What did she do to deserve this? Why burn half of her body?
I think we're all still in extreme shock. Even right now, I feel like I can call her and text her and she'll answer. I mean, we didn't get to say goodbye to our friend. This person stole our friend from us. So I don't know if we'll ever have closures.
Mackenzie's father, Greg, said, "My daughter, Mackenzie Lueck, was a sweet, amazing young lady with the world ahead of her. She was a kind-hearted person that cared about others. Now I will not have the opportunity to see her blossom in life." The prosecutor said this was murder for murder's sake, that Ayoola Ajayi had only wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone.
My life has been changed due to the selfish, premeditated decision you made on June 17, 2019. Instead of planning my daughter's graduation party, I planned her memorial.
Breaks my heart knowing that she died alone in such a scary place.
Tragically, she won't be among the graduates next spring.
This feels like a nightmare that I can't wake up from, but unfortunately, it's reality.
Today, he remains in prison, and the Luecks will never forget the bright daughter they lost. On May 21, 2016, a local police station in Green Bay, Wisconsin received this alarming phone call.
How do I go about, missing person?
Missing.
It's my girlfriend, and she does live with me, and she's never done this before.
What's her name?
Nicole Vanderheyden.
This was the voice of Doug Dietrich, Nicole's boyfriend and the father of her infant son. The last time he'd seen her was the evening before, when they'd become separated on a night out and had an argument over text messages. At 12:30 a.m., Nicole walked out of a bar called the Sardine Can and was never seen again, by her boyfriend or by anyone else. Anyone, that is, except her killer. So, what happened to her?
Do you consider Nikki to be a scrapper, a fighter?
No, I mean, she should hold her own on that, you know.
I asked her, did he ever hit you? And she said, yeah. And then she didn't elaborate anymore.
I swear to God, if I did this.
Blood in a neighbor's lawn, a hit and run, and evidence from a Fitbit. Join us on The Decoder as we piece together conflicting stories to build a picture of who Nicole Vanderheyden was and what happened to her on that fateful spring night in 2016. This case brings us to the lakeside city of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Situated on the shores of an inlet of Lake Michigan, it's known as the smallest city in the world to host a professional sports team, the Green Bay Packers. Dwarfed by the lake it sits on, which is the second largest by volume of all the 5 Great Lakes and has claimed an estimated 30,000 lives, its residents have a 1 in 233 chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime, which is higher than the rate in Wisconsin as a whole. So a call like Doug's to the Brown County Police Department wasn't exactly a rarity, but that didn't mean they didn't take it seriously. 31-year-old Nicole Vanderheyden was the mother of 3. Her son with Doug, Dylan, was only 6 months old, and she had 2 other children from a previous marriage, Michaela, age 10, and Tyler, age 9, who lived with her and Doug during the week. Her family ties and her connection to the area, she'd lived in Brown County all her life, made it unlikely that she'd simply had enough of her life and run off. No, instead, the police treated her disappearance as suspicious.
What time was that last night you last saw her?
Well, I didn't last see her. It was probably about 11:30, 12, I'm guessing.
Okay, that's the last you heard from her?
Yep, and I had talked to her on the phone. She was with a couple of my friends in a different vehicle, and then I was riding down there from the west side.
It was May 20th, 2016, and Doug and Nicole were going out with friends for a concert at a bar called The Watering Hole. They hadn't been out much since the birth of their son 6 months earlier, and the outing was a last-minute thing after they managed to find a babysitter for the kids. One of Doug's old high school friends, Aaron Kolinsky, was there, and he remembers the evening well.
Do you remember about what time he arrived?
I would say a little before 8.
Was anyone with him?
Nikki.
What was the mood as it appeared between your group? How are things going?
Very upbeat. We were all excited.
The group of friends were seeing Steel Panther, a comedic glam metal band. They were settling in for a fun Friday night, and nothing seemed amiss.
As you observed the interaction on that evening between Doug and Nikki, how did they appear to be getting along?
Happy. Ready to watch a concert.
As the concert began, did that appearance change any between those two?
Not at all.
The friends all had a good night at the Watering Hole watching the band. After the concert finished, they didn't want the evening to end, and Nikki suggested moving the party to another bar. They decided that one of their friends who brought her family van along to the venue would drive them. Doug, however, wasn't around and had last been seen talking with their friend Greg and another girl.
There was like a smoking section, and I saw them talking with a girl from our class. I would say that would be about little before 9, little before 10-ish, because the second band came on at 10.
When the friends couldn't find Doug or Greg, they decided to go to the next bar without them, taking Nikki with them so she wouldn't be left on her own. They arrived at the Sardine Can at about 11:30 p.m.
Did you observe if Nikki was drinking at the Sardine Can?
Yes. She was interacting with the bartender, some other guy at the bar.
Did she appear upset at that point in time?
No, she didn't appear upset.
They'd been at the Sardine Can for about an hour. It was close to 12:30 a.m. when the mood changed. Doug still hadn't appeared.
Did you see Nikki try to call him?
Yeah.
Was she successful?
No.
Another of their friends, Angela, also tried to call him, and this time he picked up. It seemed strange to everyone that he'd answer her call and not his girlfriend's, and Nicole reacted as anyone would, becoming upset.
As soon as Angela hung up, Nikki, basically, decided that, she didn't want any of it, and she just made a rash decision and decided to run off. It seemed like she just wanted to disconnect and take control of her own night.
But Nicole wouldn't be in control of her own night for much longer. Aaron followed her out to the street and tried to reason with her, suggesting he take her home to her young children.
Did she agree to come with you?
No, she did not. She didn't want anything to do with it.
What did she do?
I got in front of her to try to, console her a little bit, and she just became combative and kind of pushing me away, and then she kind of did like this dead weight thing and fell to the ground, was continuing to cry and kind of hitting me in my legs and stuff, screaming at the top of her lungs.
Nicole had been drinking and was deeply upset by whatever was going on between her and Doug. Screaming on the street, she was attracting attention from passers-by, and Aaron backed off. She walked away from him, using her phone, and he yelled after her.
I just yelled, we could get you home faster to your child and what you're doing, and I yelled, you're a babe in the woods.
Did she turn around and respond to that?
No, she didn't.
This was the last time he saw her, walking away from the bar on her own. He went back to the Sardine Can, and the group called an Uber to leave. Doug and Greg didn't get to the bar until 1 a.m., after the action had finished. So what had he been doing all night? According to his friend Greg Mathis, not much. He'd also been at high school with Doug and had known him since before freshman year. It was Greg who'd convinced the couple to come out to the concert that night.
I'm sure that Nikki would like to get out of the house and that we could go out and have a fun time.
At the concert, they got talking to an old high school friend they hadn't seen in a while and lost track of time. They were all having a good night, at least early on, and according to Greg, there was no sign of the oncoming conflict. By the time Greg and Doug finished catching up with their friend, there was no sign of the rest of the group, including Nikki. But they talked about going to the Sardine Can earlier, so they knew where to go. At about 12:20 a.m., Greg drove them over from the watering hole, with Doug leaving his car behind. They'd had a few drinks each and had also snorted some Adderall, which Doug had apparently provided. At 12:36 a.m. en route, Doug called Nicole. By this time, she'd already stormed out of the bar. He told her they were on their way, but she was upset and slurring her words, and he couldn't understand her. He handed the phone to Greg.
She made a comment that she didn't believe it was me, that it was Doug playing a trick on her, which I was, Nikki, it's me. I'll pick you up wherever you are. And at that point, her phone shut off. I don't believe she hung up on me. I believe the battery died.
They drove up and down the streets around the Sardine Can looking for her. They couldn't find her, so they just went into the bar, hoping maybe she'd come back. She hadn't. Their group had left too, but they stayed to have a few shots and finally left at about 2:15 a.m. They got back to Doug and Nicole's house half an hour later. Nicole wasn't there. At this point, it was becoming a distinct possibility that Nicole was in trouble. But she was an adult, and it was late, and maybe she'd still arrive back home by the morning. They tried calling her a few more times, and then both Greg and the babysitter left the house, and Nicole never came home. In court, Greg said that Doug had been calm that night and hadn't even been made angry by any of Nikki's behavior, not even the barrage of text messages she sent him at around 11:12 p.m. So what you with? You abusive and wow, what are you with? Because none of your friends know. Doug also said he hadn't been fazed by this treatment.
I responded back something kind of nicely, just trying to diffuse and maybe calm her down because she seemed upset. I was kind of puzzled. I didn't know what she was thinking.
His text responses supported this. He wrote, "LOL, stop," and "Be good. I'll see you at the sardine can." But in a police interview earlier on, Greg had said something different about Doug's response over the phone.
Yelling at her, man. He's yelling at her like, "Don't be stupid. Go back to the sardine can. What the hell are you doing? You know, we're on our way right now. We're on our way. I'm sorry."
Whatever the tone of Doug's response, he didn't get the authorities involved in Nicole's disappearance until the following afternoon.
I just was thinking that she was just drunk and upset, and that would, you know, she'll calm down. Let's just talk and come to our senses here and work this out, and actually talk like adults and work it out.
Based on your experience with Nikki, can she usually take care of herself?
Yeah, at most points, yes.
Nicole was an adult. She was from the area. She was the mother of 3. She'd become intoxicated, upset, and ran off from the bar, leaving her friends behind. No one knew what had happened to her after that, and when she hadn't come home by 4:30 p.m. on May 21st, Doug called the police. But across town, a horrible discovery had already been made. 2 teenage boys working to clear rocks from a farm field on Hoffman Road on that Saturday afternoon had spotted what they thought was a dead deer. But it wasn't a deer, it was a dead human body. The body of a woman. An adult called the police at 1:54 p.m. The body was naked save for one sock and a concert bracelet. A bracelet from the Steel Panther concert at the watering hole the night before. There was a footprint on the victim's naked back. It was Nicole Vanderheyden, and she'd been murdered. A little while after 5 p.m. and following Doug's 911 call about a missing person, the police arrived at his house. The responding officer described him as looking pale and hungover when he answered the door, and she didn't see any scratches or marks on his hands that could be defensive wounds.
Hi, I'm here for a missing persons report.
She didn't tell him a body had already been found matching Nicole's description, but she did ask him for identifying features. He described what Nicole had been wearing when he last saw her at the watering hole: a black and gray striped shirt, black capri pants, and high heels.
She would have had a bracelet on.
Okay.
It was a pink bracelet for the 21 verification.
He was cooperative with the officer's questions and volunteered to give them his phone for analysis. The officer looked at his text conversation with Nicole the night before.
Why is she calling you abusive?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know where she gets this stuff sometimes.
Is that common for her to talk that way to you when she's been drinking?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean,
or when she's sober?
She doesn't drink that often, but
okay.
All of a sudden she gets that in her head that that's what's going on.
Sure.
They also discussed Nicole's mental health history.
When she gets a little down, she mentions suicide, but she just talks that.
Does she take any medication for it?
No. She had been on medication before.
The officer, knowing that Nicole's body had already been found and the cause of death was being determined, knew that Nicole had not committed suicide.
How would you say, for the most part, I mean, your relationship is with her? Do you get along for the most part? And last night,
yeah.
Last night was a flip of the switch, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she does that from time to time. It's just...
Have you guys ever gotten physical with each other?
No. And that's another thing. She'll say that I'm abusive and all this, and I never have been.
Nicole had been living a fairly secluded life after the birth of Dylan, staying at home to look after him and not really drinking. She'd been suffering some depression, and her dynamic with Doug, it seemed, had turned rocky. He said she acted irrationally and accused him of things that weren't true, and that was what had happened the night before. However, he maintained that the last time he saw her was at the watering hole before she left to go to the sardine can. It was after the officer left that Doug received a text about the discovery of a body in a field over in Bellevue. It was reported on the 10 p.m. news, and Nicole's family had begun to panic. 2 hours later, at midnight, the police reappeared at Doug's door. They wanted him to come down to the station for an interview. He agreed, and they asked him to go over again the timeline for the evening, what they'd done before going to the concert, which was get food at the McDonald's drive-thru, and what time he'd last seen her at the bar. He also talked about a time when Nicole had stormed off before.
There was another time she did just walk off on her own. That was in, it was like January, it was the night after, it was the night of the Arizona playoff game. She had started freaking out on me in the bar, and then she actually hit me at the bar there, and like ran out. And it was like zero, and I ran out after a squad had pulled in and stopped her, and then I ran up and talked to her, and she was like belligerent with the officers there, and then I ended up putting her in the back of the squad car.
Nicole had a history of getting upset while out drinking with Doug, but usually he was able to chase after her and bring her home, and it had never ended badly. Not until now.
Does Nikki have any enemies out there? Anybody that...
Not knowing that.
She has had problems with anybody recently?
No, I mean, besides little family issues, she said her mom was not really there for her sometimes, and her and her sister had gotten in an argument a couple months ago, and they had started talking here again a couple weeks ago.
But these family issues were minor problems, not a motive for murder. Because that's what the investigators were looking for, a reason someone might have killed Nicole Vanderheyden. When Doug was left alone in the interview room, he began to freak out.
This news thing is freaking me out. Can you tell me it's not her?
Finally, after getting another detailed description of Nicole's identifying features, the police told him they believed they'd found her.
Well, I think what we're looking at is this body that was found down the street. I don't think it's been 100% identified as her, but there's a lot of similarities.
What do you mean a lot of similarities?
They also told him that they were executing a search warrant on his property and that they needed to take his clothes for analysis. Meanwhile, he seemed devastated by the news of Nikki's death.
I'm going to talk to everybody on that frickin' street in that neighborhood. I need to do it. I swear to God, I'm going to find who did this.
Doug was released at about 3 a.m. after this interview, and his parents picked him up. Later that day, May 22nd, the police called and requested a DNA sample. On his lawyer's advice, he denied this request, preferring to wait until they had a warrant. But warrant or not, one thing had become clear: that Doug Dietrich was currently the prime suspect in his girlfriend's killing. Nicole Vanderheyden was born Nicole Meyer on March 29, 1985, in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Like Green Bay, Manitowoc was on the shores of Lake Michigan, but it was a much smaller place. Growing up, Nicole loved outdoor pursuits like nature walks and hiking. She graduated in 2003 from Denmark High School and then went to college at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, graduating with a double major in science and education in 2010. She took what she'd learned into her career, becoming a substitute teacher for the Green Bay area public school system. She worked in elementary and middle schools, where her commitment to the kids she taught and her friendliness as a colleague were noted. To supplement her income, she also worked occasional shifts at a nearby restaurant. Nicole had married a man named Brian Vanderheyden shortly after graduating high school, and together they had 2 children, Michaela and Tyler, born in 2006 and 2007. The couple later divorced because Nicole wasn't satisfied with her life.
I don't know, I think she was just kind of bored with him. He was a good man, but he had just no ambition, and he was fine where he was, and she wanted more out of life.
Brian and Nicole remained on good terms and shared custody, with Nicole looking after the kids during the week and Brian seeing them on weekends. In the frigid January of 2015, a chance encounter changed the trajectory of Nicole's life again, meeting a man named Douglas Dietrich in a bar called Jimmy C's. Doug was having drinks with some friends to celebrate the NFL football playoff weekend, and Nicole was there too. They caught each other's eye across the room, wound up having a drink together, and the rest, as they say, was history. That is, until that fateful night in May 2016. Doug Dietrich was born in August 1981 in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where he'd lived all his life. He graduated from a local high school in 2000 and went to technical school, as well as doing some online courses. But his main focus was the family business, a contracting firm which his grandfather had started in 1955. He started working on sites with his family when he was still in high school and continued to work for them as a subcontractor, as well as doing apartment rental management and general self-employed contracting. The home he and Nicole would move into was a home he and his family firm had built. It was only a month after their first meeting that Nicole became pregnant with Doug's child. She and her 2 children moved into Doug's house by the end of summer 2015, and they were thinking about getting married in the future. They talked about their son Dylan, who was born in October, walking them down the aisle. But there was also trouble in paradise.
In May of 2016, were you closer to breaking up with Nikki or closer to marrying Nikki?
I would say, in between, there was, we had some arguments about a few minor things.
In the same month, only a few weeks before Nikki's death, he texted his mom saying, "When the house sells, we're going to go our separate ways. Don't worry about it, it is what it is." Doug later said he didn't remember the specific conversation, and there was no evidence of the house being put on the market. He also said that on May 10th, 10 days before that final night at the watering hole, "I'm very seriously thinking about telling Nikki and the kids they have to move. I'm not cut out for this life one bit." He explained it away later.
I was having a little downer day or whatever, and I just said that to my mom with not truly meaning it, I guess.
The period after Dylan's birth was financially stressful, as Nikki had stopped working to look after their newborn, and Doug had also taken some time off work. He'd only just gone back to working, with uncertain hours and much less time with his family, in May. Meanwhile, Nikki was transitioning Dylan from breastfeeding. With a lot going on at home, tensions were running high. This led to texts from Nikki, too, like the one on May 8th that said, "Thanks for making me feel like a piece of every day." Apparently, she'd been telling her mom, Victoria Meyer, about her issues with Doug.
She was real concerned. He did a lot of drug use.
That's what Nicole told you?
Yeah, cocaine. Yes, she told me she was very concerned about that, and she was trying to help him.
After her daughter's death, Victoria told the police about an occasion when Nicole had wanted to go out to a wine tasting with Doug and asked her mom to babysit. She'd said she dropped the kids off at Victoria's at 8. By 10, she still hadn't arrived. When Victoria called, Nicole was upset. Doug had gone out at 8 for a haircut, despite knowing they had plans.
I think that was his way of controlling the situation, saying he didn't want to go. And I asked her, "Did he ever hit you?" And she said, "Yeah."
This was hearsay translated through a source who was worried frantic, Nicole's mom, who just learned that her daughter had been murdered. But the police found it deeply incriminating. Doug also had a history of allegedly dubious relationships. One ex-girlfriend who dated him in 2012 claimed he put tracking software on her phone and would turn up outside her work unannounced. She said he continued to contact her on Snapchat even after the relationship ended, including in the beginning of his relationship with Nicole in 2015. Doug's internet search history also allegedly displayed visits to local escort websites in the days before Nicole's death, and he'd apparently searched for how to tell if Backpage Escort is undercover. On May 23rd, all this culminated in the reveal of physical evidence. 2 days earlier, the morning after Nicole had last been seen, a neighbor of Doug and Nicole's had been mowing his lawn, and he'd spotted a pool of blood near the grass line. He assumed it belonged to an animal, and when he came across a length of black cord, he just tossed it on the sidewalk, forgetting to throw it in the trash. But when Nicole was identified in the news reports 2 days later, he called the police about what he'd seen. The police arrived to secure the scene at about 5:45 p.m. They found dried blood spatters in the street with clumps of blonde hair stuck to them and a charging cord. They sent these items of evidence off for DNA analysis, and meanwhile they searched Doug and Nicole's house. Previously, they hadn't been sure where Nicole had died, but now the truth was becoming clear, that she died in close proximity to her own home. And in that home, they found evidence enough to arrest Doug for her murder. This included a pair of Air Jordans that had possible blood spots on them and a herringbone tread that seemed to match the shoe print found on Nicole's back. There was also what appeared to be blood on the floor of the garage near Nicole's car. Her autopsy had revealed 2 causes of death: strangulation and blunt force trauma. She had 241 injuries across her body, and her face had been beaten to the extent that it was unrecognizable. The police believed that the charging cord found in the neighbor's yard was the weapon that had been used to strangle her. Meanwhile, her bloodied clothes had been found on a highway ramp on the way to the field where her body was discovered. At 7 p.m. on the evening of May 23rd, the police arrested Doug.
Right now I'm going to be taking you into custody. I'm going to be handcuffing you. I'll explain all that to you in a bit, and transporting you down to the sheriff's department.
They had collected enough circumstantial evidence to hold him in custody, but they needed the final piece of the puzzle, a positive DNA result to both Nicole and Doug on the murder weapon. And on June 10th, the results came back, but not the way police were expecting. The blood on the garage floor likely belonged to a turkey Doug had shot weeks before, and the spots on his shoes weren't blood at all. The blood and hair found in his neighbor's yard were indeed Nicole's, but there was no sign of Doug's DNA anywhere to go along with it. The cable also tested positive for Nicole's DNA. Nicole's and an unknown man's. This new physical evidence threw the investigators' case into disarray. What if it hadn't been Doug who'd killed Nicole at all? One further piece of evidence served to exonerate him: the data from his Fitbit, one that Nicole herself had bought him. Nicole had been murdered between 3 and 4 a.m. At that time, Doug had been wearing his Fitbit, and it had registered only 12 steps between 3:10 a.m. and 6:10 a.m. that morning. The attack on Nicole had been active and violent, at odds with Doug's recorded lack of activity. Doug didn't do it, so who did? The investigation lingered for months, threatening to turn into a cold case. But in August 2016, the police got their big break thanks to continued DNA testing, which had found a match for a sample taken from Nicole's sock. This match was a man from Virginia named George Stephen Birch. Birch had recently moved to the Green Bay area and had been staying with a friend, Edward Jackson. Jackson's wife's SUV, a red Chevy Blazer, had been stolen, and she'd reported it missing on June 8, 2016. She learned that this same vehicle was suspected to have been involved in a hit-and-run the night before and had been found on fire at 2:52 a.m., a few blocks from the Jacksons' house. The police suspected Birch of this crime, though he was never charged. To avert suspicion, Birch claimed he'd been texting a woman he met in a bar that night and gave the police his phone to prove it. They cloned his phone and returned it to him so they could examine its contents. Within mere months of coming to Wisconsin, Birch had gotten into serious trouble with the law, first with the stolen SUV, and now with Nicole's murder. So who was he? Birch was born in Hampton, Virginia, to parents he'd never know. He was adopted within a week of his birth. He was a linebacker and earned the nickname Big Country as young as the age of 6 due to his size. As an adult, he stood at 6 feet 7 inches. In 1997, at the age of 19, he was accused of shooting a gang leader and his neighborhood rival in the head while out on bond for another offense. The case went to trial and he was acquitted because the evidence wasn't strong enough. 5 shots were fired from at least 2 guns, and the fatal bullet was never found. Still, his criminal history didn't end there. He received a suspended sentence for grand larceny in January 2016, and in March he had a trial scheduled on charges of heroin possession. But by May 24th, he had been listed as a fugitive, having violated the conditions of his release by going to Wisconsin to stay with his old friend. In February, he'd called Jackson to say that he and his wife were on the outs and he had nowhere else to go. Birch had met his wife Beth through his cousin in April 2000, and shortly after, they got married. They moved to New York to be closer to her parents and in case they wanted to have a child.
Where I'm from was rapidly getting worse. We didn't see it as a perfect place to raise a child. If we decided to go that route, it was a lot of violence and things were going on. People were getting shot and things stabbed and like that all the time.
In New York, Beth worked as a waitress while he found a job working in construction. They had their first child a year after getting married in 2002 and their second 3 years later. But by 2014, their marriage had deteriorated, and Birch's criminal activities couldn't have helped. When he was released from jail to serve a suspended sentence, he told Jackson he was looking for a new start, and that's what Jackson tried to give him. He picked Birch up from the station in Chicago on February 29th. He was charging Birch $100 a week in rent, but Birch rapidly fell behind on his payments, though he was working first in a restaurant and then for a landscaping firm. Still, the relationship between the two friends was going strong, and on May 21st, the day after Nicole's murder, they went on a fishing trip together. Jackson didn't notice anything unusual about Birch's behavior that day, though he spent most of the 2.5-hour drive at 1:30 p.m. sleeping. After the SUV incident in June, the Jacksons asked Birch to move out and bought him a bus ticket back to Virginia. He didn't go anywhere, however, and spent the next few months couch surfing, so he was still in town when the police's attention turned on him, and they realized they still had the data downloaded from his phone from the crime on June 8th. Birch's search history showed that he had repeatedly viewed a news story about Nicole's death after the discovery of her body on May 21st. This was his only internet search other than pornography. He searched for news about Nicole on May 22nd, 24th, 25th, 26th, and June 5th and 6th. Even more incriminating was his geolocation data. His phone showed that he'd been at Richard Cranium's bar on the night of May 20th, only half a mile from the sardine can. He left the bar at 2:30 a.m. and went not back to the Jacksons' house, but to Nicole's house. He stayed there from 3:01 to 3:52 a.m., almost the entire window the medical examiner had given for her murder. Then, just after 4 a.m., he went to the highway ramp where her clothes were found and the farm field in Bellevue where her body was discovered. He went back home at 4:22 a.m. This was enough. Birch was arrested.
The reason you're here is in reference to a homicide investigation into Nicole Vanderheyden. Okay? So, is this something that you want to talk to me about?
I'm sorry?
What's that? You don't want to talk to me about that? So if I read your Miranda rights, you don't want to talk to me?
I prefer a lawyer.
Okay.
Birch lawyered up, as was his right, and with his lawyer he pleaded not guilty, and in his defense he implicated Doug. He alleged that he'd met Nicole at Richard Cranium's bar on the night of May 20th, after she'd stormed out of the sardine can.
I noticed there was a fairly attractive blonde woman standing next to me, and started talking to her, just making conversation.
According to Birch, they were flirting with each other.
Well, I moved a little closer to her, just talking, laughing, joking, giggling, light touch here or there, just things that you can pretty much tell if someone's kind of into you, I guess.
He said that he drove her over to his house, Jackson's house, but Jackson's father was there, and it killed the mood. So they got back in the car and she gave him directions to her own house, he said, and they pulled up outside it. They couldn't go in because the babysitter was there, he said, though he didn't explain why Nicole couldn't just tell the babysitter to leave. He alleged that they then had consensual sex in his car.
The next thing that I remember, apart from us having intercourse, was literally waking up on the ground outside the truck, laying in the grass curb area.
He said that Doug had seen them having sex in the car, that Doug had knocked Birch unconscious, and that the next thing Birch knew, Doug was standing over him with a gun, and Nicole was already dead.
There was a lot of blood on her face, come out of her mouth, on her back, but she wasn't physically moving.
Birch claimed that Doug forced him at gunpoint to help dispose of Nicole's body by putting it in the car and driving to dump it in a ditch.
I was instructed to carry her and put her in the vehicle.
Birch, he said, obeyed.
It's not looking good. I'm in the middle of somewhere. I don't know where I am. I have no idea overall what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what to do in this situation, and I'm trying to figure out the best way for me to remove myself from this situation, if at all possible.
Birch said that when he took Nicole out of the car, Doug was distracted and he seized the opportunity.
Everything I had, I lunged at him and pushed him as hard as I possibly could at that time.
He said he ran back to his truck and drove away. He found that Nicole's clothes were still in his vehicle, so he threw them out of the window on his way home. But the DNA and Fitbit evidence remained. It was not Doug's DNA on the cord used to strangle Nicole. It was Birch's. And Doug had apparently only taken 12 steps all those early morning hours. There was also Birch's impressive stature. At 6'7" and weighing in at 250 pounds, he was not a man who is easily physically overcome. And his criminal past, including his previous indictment for murder, meant that he'd likely been in dangerous situations before. The prosecution had a very different version of events to tell the jury. They made the case that Birch did indeed pick Nicole up after she stormed from the sardine can, but she didn't have consensual sex with him.
Because it wasn't consensual, right?
No, sir, that's not true.
What really happened was you drove Nicole home 20 miles away from where you lived, fully expecting that you were going to have sex, right? That's why you're driving her home, right?
I was hoping that we would. It was leading from what had happened before and where we had spoken. It seemed like that's what was going to happen.
And when you get there, and it becomes clear that Nikki isn't going to have sex with you, when she attempts to go into her house and leave your vehicle, that's when your mood changes.
Instead, she refused to sleep with him, and he raped her, beat her, and murdered her in a rage because of the rejection. He then drove her body to the farm field in order to escape detection. So the trial, which took place in March 2018, became a battle of two competing narratives around the same facts: whether Nicole had been murdered out of rejection or jealousy, and whether it had been Birch or Doug. A significant moment came when Birch lost his temper on cross-examination about how he'd carried Nicole's body, supposedly at gunpoint. The prosecutor referenced him dragging her, and he denied it.
I told you before, and I will say it one more time for you, sir. I was carrying her over to this area.
45 minutes into the jury's deliberation, they asked to see the cord used to strangle Nicole alongside cords found in Doug's garage to compare. This suggested that Birch's story was under serious consideration in the deliberation room. But after 3 hours, the verdict was returned: guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. George Birch had killed Nicole Vanderheyden. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The sentencing judge described the crime as the most brutal murder that has ever been committed by one person in the history of Brown County. Birch appealed in 2021 on the basis that his Fourth Amendment rights to privacy had been violated by the use of his phone data at trial. That data had been downloaded to investigate a different crime: the theft, hit and run, and burning of Jackson's wife's SUV. He also argued against the validity of the Fitbit evidence, as it had not been accompanied by an expert witness who could properly validate or else expose the flaws of such technology. The appeal was rejected, and his sentence was upheld. However, Doug Dietrich's legal troubles were not yet over. In February 2017, nearly a year after Nicole's murder, Nicole's sister was staying with Doug to help him look after Dylan, who was by this time a toddler. She alleged that they went out to a birthday party together, and when he was driving her back, he touched her leg inappropriately. She said she told him to stop, which angered him, and he accelerated the car. He ran a stoplight and wouldn't let her out of the car until she kicked the windshield. He pleaded no contest to second-degree recklessly endangering safety and false imprisonment, both of which are domestic violence felonies. He also pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge of negligent operation of a vehicle. He was ordered to pay a $1,000 fine and stay out of trouble until October 2019, in which case the felonies would be dismissed. In August 2018, Doug and Nicole's family sought $269,000 in restitution from George Birch, which was granted. Part of his sentence also stipulates that he cannot profit from any book or movie made about the murder. Any such profits must go to Doug and Nicole's family. Now, Doug continues to raise his and Nicole's young son Dylan on his own.
What is the address of your emergency?
I'm having your call at the neighbor's house. I'm scared to death.
I was scared, thinking that he was coming in to kill him.
This is the voice of Rachel Hendricks, a woman who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Rachel was one of 3 friends invited to Amanda Colley's upmarket house in a quiet suburb on an ordinary Thursday morning in August 2015. They were there to comfort Amanda about the breakdown of her marriage. Rachel could not have predicted that not long after she arrived, she would be barricading herself in a closet and pleading for her life. She was shot in the arm, but she managed to escape. Amanda and another friend were not so lucky. Lindy Dobbins was shot 3 times. Amanda herself was shot 9 times. Their lives ended in a hectic burst of tragedy, both leaving young children behind. These families were ripped apart, but why? What was the reason for this awful attack, devastating a quiet community? Let's dive into the tragic story of Amanda Colley, for whom the help of the courts came far too late. Amanda was living in her old family house in Mirabella, St. Augustine, Florida. This was a pleasant, upscale community, chosen by her and her husband James Colley Jr. as an idyllic location to raise their children. Mirabella's community website describes it as resort-style living close to home. And to all appearances, the Colleys were living a luxury Floridian life of bliss. Neighbors recall watching James play with their children in the cul-de-sac. Trey, who in 2015 was 6, and Avery, who was 4. The family lived a convivial, social existence. They often had the neighbors over for drinks and parties. Even when the couple began to drift apart, they seemed to do so politely. Whatever went on behind closed doors was just that, kept hidden from public view. It is for this reason that the events of August 27, 2015 came as such a devastating surprise to the entire neighborhood. Around 9 a.m. on August 27th, Rachel Hendricks was told that something was going on with her friend Amanda. They'd been friends for a few years, having met at a mutual acquaintance's party, and the two of them, together with Lindy Dobbins, had become a close trio. They would watch each other's kids and go to the neighborhood pool together. In moments of distress, too, they would call on each other. So it made sense that Lindy and Rachel got involved on this fatal morning. That morning, Rachel dropped her kids off at school and then went to a hairdresser friend's house to get her hair done.
Okay. Did there come a time that you were notified that something was going on in Amanda's house?
Yes.
And who notified you of that?
Lindy.
After her hair appointment, Rachel went over to Amanda's house.
I went inside. I walked inside and walked up to Amanda and Lindy. Amanda was crying, and I just gave her a big hug and told her that it was going to be okay. I ransacked home, a mess everywhere.
Amanda's usually pristine Mirabella home had been trashed overnight while Amanda was out. When she'd returned at 9 a.m., she found it in a state of disarray, a terrifying thing to come home to in any circumstances. But this was not an ordinary break-in. Nothing had been stolen, only rifled through and torn apart, as though the culprit had been looking for evidence of something. Perhaps she already realized how much danger she was in then. Perhaps that's why she called multiple friends over to be there with her, thinking of safety in numbers. But there was no such thing. There were 4 people in the home that morning: Amanda, Lindy, Rachel, and Lamar Dubberly. Lamar Dubberly was Amanda's boyfriend. Amanda had been formally separated from her husband James since June, and she'd met Lamar in April.
The relationship started professionally, progressed into a personal relationship, and then we began seeing each other in June 2015.
Lamar was ex-military. He'd attended the U.S. Naval Academy and the Marine Corps University. He'd also worked at the Pentagon. He was an impressive man, and he met Amanda when they were both working corporate management at Fanatics, a sportswear company. As Amanda's relationship with her husband broke down, she grew closer to Lamar, and they began seeing each other after the separation. As a result, it was Lamar she called on that fateful Thursday morning when she found her house ransacked and her belongings rifled through. Lamar, Lindy, and Rachel were all there to comfort Amanda and make her feel safer in her own home again. Amanda showed them the damage to her property. Then Lamar showed Rachel the damage to the garage while Lindy and Amanda were talking upstairs. Rattled, Lamar and Rachel went back into the living room, unaware that the day's trouble had only just begun.
Standing in the living room, and there was a loud shatter of glass, a small explosion, like a bang. So I looked out back and I saw Mr. Colley standing in the backyard with a handgun shooting into the living room.
The attacker was none other than Amanda's estranged husband, James. he was shooting at Rachel and Lamar in the house that his family had previously shared so seemingly happily together, shattering the windows and aiming to kill.
I, again, was trying to figure out, I said, what the hell was that? And he said, that's gunfire.
I was standing approximately here. The pop, it did not sound like a gunshot to me initially. I picked up the first bullet hole. The second bullet hole appeared closer to where I was standing.
James was aiming the gun from the backyard. He seemed in a rage, shouting a question.
Where is he? Where is he?
Lamar rapidly realized that James, Amanda's estranged husband, was looking for him. He was Amanda's new boyfriend, and if James was here out of jealousy, which Lamar thought likely, then Lamar was in severe danger. James had a gun and was not afraid to use it.
I thought that I was the target individual, and so I wasn't armed. I left.
Lamar yelled for everyone to run. Then he ran out of the house through the garage, ducking under the garage door and running between two houses in the cul-de-sac. Amanda and Lindy were further from the exit. They had nowhere to go but into the master bedroom. Rachel ran up into the master bedroom too. Amanda hid herself in the bathroom, while Rachel and Lindy barricaded themselves in the closet.
I wedged my foot up underneath the door and had my left hand on the doorknob.
Lindy hid behind a chest of drawers inside the master closet, while Rachel tried to barricade the closet door as best she could. Meanwhile, James entered the house. If he was looking for Lamar, clearly he hadn't realized that Lamar had already escaped, because James was coming up the stairs, gun in hand.
I heard Mr. Colley in the bathroom in a conversation with Amanda. Lindy had called 911.
This 911 call was at 10:36 a.m. The women were in serious trouble, and James was in a frenzy, screaming at Amanda, demanding, "Where is he?" He didn't realize he'd already scared Lamar off, and that the only people who remained in the house were his estranged wife and her friends. Amanda said she didn't know.
Amanda was, very upset, crying, saying that he's not in here. I don't know. He's not in here. At one point, I believe Mr. Colley came over and tried to get into the closet door, and Amanda said, "He's not in there. That's Rachel and Lindy." And at that time, I heard a shot, and that was all I heard of Amanda.
Rachel, terrified, was hiding in the closet with Lindy on the phone to 911. They didn't know what had happened to Amanda, if her husband had shot and killed her, and James was looking to wreak revenge on someone who wasn't there, Lamar Dubberly. What would he do when he discovered that Lamar was long gone?
Mr. Colley was trying to get into the bathroom door, saying, open the door, I'm going to shoot." So he shot through the door, and the bullet grazed my arm.
Fearing for her life and in pain from the bullet wound, Rachel backed away from the door, allowing James to slam it open. But James wasn't interested in Rachel at all. He stalked straight past her and went for Lindy, who was on her knees.
Heard Lindy say, "Oh my God, no," and I ran out of the closet and heard a shot.
Rachel ran out of the house, looking for someone to help. She managed to escape into a mutual friend's home. Meanwhile, Lamar had stumbled across someone else who also called 911 for help. But by the time the police arrived on the scene, James Colley Jr. had fled, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. Rachel had been wounded in the arm. Lamar, luckily, was unharmed, but both Lindy and Amanda were dead. Lindy had been shot 3 times, and Amanda had been shot 9 times. James had shot her once before breaking into the closet where Lindy and Rachel were hiding, and then 8 more times after he'd killed Lindy, first using a 9mm handgun, shooting her 3 times with it until it was out of bullets, and then using his .45, which he'd brought as a backup. This showcased a terrible level of rage against his estranged wife. But why? He'd been looking for Lamar, jealous of his wife's new relationship, but how had it got to this awful point? How did this tragedy unfold? Not much is known about the beginning of James and Amanda's relationship. Amanda was 36 in 2015, a year older than James. She was born in Orlando, Florida, and had a successful professional life and lots of friends. James seemed ordinary himself. He worked in the mortgage industry and led a successful life alongside his professional wife. He was much loved by his sister, Crystal.
So the moment he woke up, told Mama that he was dead, he spent with his children. He taught them to swim.
But this loving father had a dark side and a dark past.
There ever a time when your mom acted violently towards your dad in the presence of jail?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
There was a time my father had been having a marital affair. My mother was called and informed. I saw her sitting on the stairs with a baseball bat. My mom began hitting my father with a baseball bat. And my mom came to the house to see us for Thanksgiving, and her and my father got into another confrontation. My dad wasn't going to let her come into the home. And my mother grabbed a knife.
James witnessed this aggression around his father's extramarital affair by his mother, to the extent that his mother physically attacked his father where he could see it. Maybe this did something to his psyche, as a defense lawyer would certainly argue. But James and Amanda were separated by August 27, 2015, and had been separated for months. James was also seeing someone else. His rage-filled attack was the final awful event in a long line of escalating aggression against Amanda, who just wanted to escape an increasingly toxic marriage. James expressed disproportionate jealousy over Lamar's presence in Amanda's life, despite the separation. A few months before the murders, a neighbor sent him a photo of Lamar mowing Amanda's lawn without a shirt on. He reacted with fury, commencing a barrage of abusive texts and voicemails to Amanda that continued until the day of the murders. He texted her, "Oh, and your boyfriend has been parking at the playground and walking around the back. The whole neighborhood knows. You should just have him park out front like a man. Yeah, everyone knows what you are. Don't worry, I will speak with him face to face sooner than later." Amanda responded, "He's not my boyfriend like I've told you before. He helps me with the yard work, paint, moving furniture, etc." To which James replied, "So why doesn't he park in the driveway if he isn't hiding? And I guess he is married, right? I have a pic of him." These text messages were veiled threats, and he'd acted on these threats before. Amanda had a domestic violence injunction against him, and he'd already broken that injunction by taking her clothes from her house and setting them on fire in the yard. In fact, he was in court for this violation on the morning of August 27th, appearing calm and collected less than an hour before he so horrifically murdered his wife and her friend. James could be contrary. The day before the murders, August 26th, he also texted Amanda, "Please try to start forgiving me so we can move on. I really miss you and our family being together." But he followed this conciliatory text with another deeply intrusive act. At about 4 a.m. on August 27th, he broke into her house, looking for evidence that she was seeing someone new. He found this evidence, including adult toys and men's clothing. He ransacked the house in a rage. This was what Amanda would come home to at 9 a.m. This was why she would call Rachel and Lindy, fatally, to join her. That same day, after vandalizing her belongings, he texted her, "You're an awesome person. Don't take me from my kids. It's all I have. Call me, or I am going to come find you." This was one of the last communications he would have with her before killing her. His threat came true, though she did call him and argued with him on the phone at 9:41 a.m., about 10 minutes after he left the courthouse. This didn't stop him from coming to find her anyway. From the courthouse, he drove to a gas station, then to his sister's house where he'd been staying. He then drove back to the same gas station to buy gas before heading straight to Amanda's house. Somewhere on the way, he must have picked up guns and ammunition because by the time he arrived at Amanda's, he was fully armed with 2 handguns, a 9mm and a .45. On the way, James called his father. His father was outside when he took the call, and a nearby dog walker overheard it. She testified she heard James's father pleading, "Please, please, son, come back and get your truck. Everybody knows what you've been through." And the person on the other end of the call replied, "I just can't take this anymore." This is when he arrived at Amanda's house. He parked on an adjacent street and approached the house from the rear. But he discarded all caution in shooting straight at Rachel and Lamar in the living room. He was a man on a terrible mission, and he wouldn't stop until 2 people were dead. When he'd killed Lindy and Amanda, James fled. But with 2 witnesses, Rachel and Lamar unharmed and Rachel mildly injured, the police knew to search for him immediately. A manhunt commenced, and he was found in Norton, Virginia that same night when another driver called 911. She said she'd been nearly run off the road by a man driving recklessly. She said, "He has been stopped in the middle of the road. I had to stop. He was on me. I couldn't even. My kids are scared. Yeah, my mom had to sit in the back of my car to keep my kids calm. They're scared, and I have a newborn that's just 4 pounds." Norton police stopped James in his car. He possessed several firearms. They ran a check and found him wanted for homicide in Florida, and he was arrested. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Amanda Colley, the first-degree murder of Lindy Dobbins, the attempted first-degree murder of Rachel Hendricks, the attempted first-degree murder of Lamar Dubberly, burglary with an assault or battery, burglary of a dwelling, and aggravated stalking after an injunction. At trial, the defense argued that the attack had not been premeditated and that James had been in an aggravated emotional state, under the influence of Ambien or alcohol or other drugs, and experiencing parasomnia, according to a psychiatrist, effectively sleepwalking. However, this defense was severely weakened by his presence in court only an hour and a half before the killings. At this court hearing, he denied being under the influence of any intoxicants and responded sensibly and reasonably to the injunction proceedings. This undermined the defense's later case that because he had taken drugs and drunk alcohol the night before, alongside taking an Ambien to sleep, he was in an altered state. In fact, there was footage to the contrary. The jury unanimously found James Colley Jr. guilty on all counts. They also provided a unanimous recommendation for the death penalty based on 4 aggravating factors proven beyond reasonable doubt: that he was previously convicted of another capital or violent felony, which applied because he had committed multiple murders and attempted murders at once, that he committed the murders while also engaging in burglary, that each murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, and that he committed each murder coldly, callously, and with premeditation. The medical examiner testified that Amanda was aware throughout the entire shooting process, being shot 9 times before she died. This was a truly horrific crime. James was sentenced to death in November 2018. He appealed, but in 2020, his sentence was upheld. He remains on death row, and his 2 children with Amanda are now living with their grandparents. Lindy Dobbins' 3 children, who were 16, 10, and 9 at the time of the murders, remain with their father. Early in December 2016, a girl's borrowed car was found left on the road beside a river. She was nowhere to be found, and her family suspected the worst.
In the middle of the bridge, there's a car that's abandoned. It's off to the side of the road.
They wondered if maybe she'd taken her own life. The 19-year-old had had a harrowing few years after the death of her mother, but things had been looking up for her. She'd been hoping to move to Canada with the help of an unexpected inheritance. But now she was missing, and the answer to her disappearance lay with the most unlikely source: 3 of her childhood friends.
And the worst part is, we threw her off the bridge, and the body never showed up.
A trip to the bank, a sting operation, and a confession. This is the harrowing story of the murder of Sarah Stern.
Bro, this is like a fucking movie, bro.
It started in the early hours of December 3rd, 2016, on the Jersey Shore.
911, where is the emergency?
Not emergency. Actually on the Belmar Bridge, right after heading south in the middle of the bridge, there's a car that's abandoned.
What kind of car is it?
Kind of looks like an old beat-up, light tan-colored, sedan.
And what was your name, sir?
So if it's okay, I'd just rather be anonymous.
This is the voice of an Uber driver who'd been passing on the bridge and had noticed the stopped car.
Was there anybody inside the vehicle?
I looked, no.
This was the bridge that connected Belmar and Neptune City in New Jersey, going over Shark River, a shallow inlet right on the brink of the Atlantic Ocean. It wasn't a place you just leave your car without a reason. And this 911 call raised alarm bells with the local police department. They sent an officer over to check out the scene. He found the car, an Oldsmobile 88, just as the caller had described it. Empty, with no sign of its driver, and the keys still in the ignition. When they ran the license plate, they found the car was registered to 96-year-old Lillian Stern. Lillian was the matriarch of a large family. She had 15 grandchildren, 19 great-grandchildren, and 6 great-great-grandchildren. One of these grandchildren was 19-year-old Sarah Stern, who frequently borrowed her car. With this information, the pieces rapidly came together. Sarah's father, Michael Stern, had been attempting to contact her all night since the evening of December 2nd. He was on vacation in Florida, and he had no idea where she was. The last Michael had heard from her had been a text on December 1st. He'd sent her a photograph of Cinderella's castle at Disney World, and she'd replied, "Wow, the castle looks so pretty with the lights." At just after 10:30 p.m. the next evening, he asked, "Sarah, are you up?" When she didn't respond, he began to get frantic. He sent a series of texts. "Sarah, what's going on? Grandma's trying to get in touch with you. Why is your phone off? Call me when you get this message." Sarah hadn't replied to a single one of these texts. Now, the car she'd been driving had been found abandoned on a bridge. It was clear that something had happened to her. Something bad. But what? The police spoke to her friends and family to try and understand her situation further. They spoke to her neighbors and discovered that she dropped off some personal items that same afternoon.
"Can I bring my mother's stuff to your house?"
Her mother had died 3 years earlier, so these were precious belongings indeed. It wasn't a good sign for Sarah's mental state. The police arrived at the house of one of her oldest friends, Liam McAtasney, at around 4 a.m. He'd known Sarah since they were both in first grade, meeting in Sunday school at the age of 6. It seemed logical that he could provide information as to her state of mind.
What was her mindset last time you talked to her?
I just know she's been trying to get away. You can tell me she's going to Canada.
Trying to get away, okay. Canada, she's been real depressed lately?
Her dad is crazy.
The police spoke to him once that morning and then again a few days later. They wanted to understand what was going on in her life, why she might have absconded, or worse.
Does she ever talk about liking guys or...
Not that I know of. Girls? No. She has been known to obsess over girls in the past, though. One of my ex-girlfriends, a few years ago, she was completely obsessed with her right around the time her mom had cancer and was dying. And
Liam revealed that Sarah had a troubled home life. In 2013, Her mother had died of cancer. She was an only child, and this loss hit her hard in ways that Liam said made her act out.
She just would always say stuff like, "Maggie, if you don't come here right now, I'm going to kill myself." Or there have been multiple occasions where my ex-girlfriend Maggie has had to go to the Draper's house to help her with either her dad. I can't say for sure if her dad was going to do something, but there has been a few occasions where she said, "My dad's going to hurt me or I'm going to hurt myself" in the past.
She didn't have a boyfriend. In fact, Liam suspected she was a lesbian.
She was obsessed with these YouTubers, and most of them are known lesbians. So I don't know if they were her role models. I don't know. I don't know if how her family would have taken it if she were to come out and say it.
This trouble with her family was a through line, affecting everything else in her life.
I've never known her to be able to hold a job.
What about school?
She just didn't even sign up for classes.
You know why?
Canada, I guess. She needs to get away, go to Canada, get away from her dad.
Is she in Canada?
I couldn't tell you.
Liam implied she had a difficult relationship with her father, and that she'd been holding on to the idea of packing up and moving away to Canada to get away from everything. That she felt the need to escape. Had she abandoned her car on the bridge to make sure she wasn't followed when she left town?
What's her relationship like with her dad?
Not good.
When you say not good, what do you mean?
I can't say that anything's ever gotten violent, but I know that there's a lot of fighting all the time. When her mom died, she had money that was supposed to go to her, and her dad took that from her. Over the past few weeks, she's been just packaging things up in containers and moving them to other people's houses. I actually have some containers in my basement right now.
Liam painted a picture of a girl trying to escape the grasp of a controlling, aggressive father.
On the surface, in public, people know him as a very nice, friendly guy. And just from what Sarah told me, I think otherwise.
Did she ever tell you that she loves her dad?
Michael Stern was in Florida and had been for weeks. It seemed unlikely that he was somehow involved in Sarah's disappearance if the police were to class it as suspicious, but they weren't, not yet. They had very little physical evidence in the car and on the bridge to give clues as to her whereabouts. There was a surveillance camera under the bridge that hadn't been working for years. This meant that the CCTV camera attached to Sarah's neighbor's house, which showed her reversing out of her driveway at 11:45 p.m. on December 2nd, was the last camera to pick up evidence of her movements. Instead, the police had to rely on Liam's account of the day when he'd seen her for the last time.
Called her initially, asked her if she wanted to get some food, sometime between 1 and 2 o'clock.
Between 1 and 2?
I went over. We initially wrapped up all of her stuff, put it in the containers. We ate the Taco Bell in her kitchen.
You both were playing video games?
Yeah.
That's all you did up there in her bedroom? You stayed up there the whole time?
I think we might have been in the living room. I don't know. We weren't in her room when I left.
What kind of things were you talking about?
Liam said he left that afternoon to go to work and never saw her again. The account matched with the neighbor's security camera, which picked him up leaving that afternoon, as he said. It wasn't much for the investigators to go on, even if they did find Liam's long silences significant.
I want to give you the opportunity, okay?
Yeah.
To be ahead of all of this. If she provided you with information, if she told you something, if she told you that she was going somewhere, if she told you that she was going to do something, you need to tell us. Did she tell you she was going to jump off the bridge?
No. If she had told me that she was going to jump off the bridge, there would have been no way that I could have gone to work that night. I went to work and I had one of the best nights of my life. I would not have been able to do that if I knew something.
The last person to see Sarah alive, her childhood friend and closest confidant Liam, claimed he didn't know anything about her plans for that evening, if she'd made plans, either to run away to Canada or to do something worse. He worked as a server, and he said he'd gone to his shift as normal and earned a lot of money. But he did have one question for the investigators.
If she did jump off the bridge, what are the odds that she's not somewhere all the way out in the ocean by now?
Asking this question implied that Liam believed Sarah was in the water, that finding her would be a matter for a team of divers, not the Canadian police. He seemed to know more about her fate than he was saying, but he maintained that she hadn't told him anything. Sarah and Liam had known each other for 13 years. Sarah was born in March 1997 in Neptune City, where she'd lived all her life. She was artistic and athletic, and after graduating Neptune High School, she'd started at Brookdale Community College, majoring in art and TV production. She'd met Liam and his twin brother Seamus when they were all 6 years old, and the three became fast friends. They named their group The Squad, and for a while they did everything together, continuing to share classes in high school. On Liam's Facebook profile, he listed Sarah under the family section of his friends list, demonstrating just how close the two of them were. Bonds like that are often forged in difficult circumstances, and Liam had been friends with Sarah throughout her mom's cancer diagnosis, treatment, and eventual death. This also meant that he knew about her inheritance, or the lack of, as he said that Michael Stern had taken the money meant for Sarah. But it turned out this wasn't the only money. Liam said that Sarah had gone into the bank on December 2nd while he'd waited outside.
Stay in the car?
Yeah.
What did she tell you she was stopping at the bank for?
Something to do with her money. I don't know. She had found money in Avalon House a few months ago, and she has a lockbox full of money in there. She said that it must have belonged to her mother. What she thought was her mom left it for her, hid it in the house, so if her dad were to take her money, she would still have money left for her by her mom. That's
how much money?
She said it could be from 20 grand to 100 grand. She wasn't sure. Well, she told me the condition of the money was pretty bad, like it was all stuck together. Well, it was old bills, so that could have been a reason for not knowing.
Did she give you any of the money?
No.
This was Sarah's escape route, a secret stash of money that only a select few people knew about. It was her ticket to Canada and another life there. That she'd made the trip to the bank to withdraw her money on the day that she disappeared suggested that maybe she disappeared out of choice. Except for one thing, her dog, Buddy.
There's absolutely nobody home. There's one dog, and the dog is in the cage. Well, the front door was unlocked. It wasn't open. It was just the house wasn't locked up.
She was a devoted pet owner, and yet she'd left him in his cage at her house that night, which she'd left unlocked when her car had pulled out of the driveway at 11:45 p.m. Her dad was still in Florida, meaning there was no one to feed the dog once she was gone. This was out of character behavior, but not strong enough evidence to make a case. Liam's parents arranged for him to be represented by a lawyer, meaning the police couldn't speak to him any further. And as December stretched on towards Christmas, the search was called off. As Liam had said in his interview, if her body was in the river, it had likely been washed out to sea by now. Sarah Stern's disappearance was looking like it would never be solved. But in January 2017, the case would break wide open, thanks to another of Liam and Sarah's friends, a man named Anthony Curry. Anthony was another Jersey Shore native, a former classmate of Liam and Sarah's who was trying to break into the film industry. He'd spent Thanksgiving in November 2016 only a week before Sarah went missing, with Liam McAtasney, and they'd got talking about movies.
I make movies, I'm a filmmaker. He used to tell me all ideas all the time about, films I should make and all that stuff, and he told me about this idea he had to kill this girl.
Liam described his idea as the plot of a horror film about a young woman being robbed, killed, and thrown off a bridge. Anthony thought nothing of it. It seemed just a fictional idea, until weeks later, when he connected it to the news about Sarah's disappearance. With her car being found on the bridge over Shark River, it was too much of a coincidence to ignore. He called the police. The problem for the case was that there was no evidence, only hearsay. They needed to hear it from Liam himself. So on January 31st, 2017, Anthony agreed to meet with Liam and secretly record their conversation in a sting operation. They set up this meeting with a staged phone call.
My camera broke, dog. I dropped it on the shoot. It fell into a bucket of blood. You couldn't spot me some cash from that girl's money, right?
Maybe. How much do you need?
Anthony arranged to meet with him later that night over Snapchat. Liam said, "You understand how serious my situation is. I can't say anything on my phone." He had spent his interview with police misdirecting them, making it sound like Sarah had run away to Canada, committed suicide, or else had even been murdered by her father. But he didn't hold back with Anthony when they met in person, even though he tried to check that Anthony wasn't wired.
I gotta feel you up real quick, alright? You're good. No disrespect. I'll show you. No disrespect, okay? Nothing. Yeah, I got the FBI on my ass, dude. I had planned Sarah's situation for me to be interrogated by cops. That was whole part of my plan, to make me look not guilty. And the worst part is, we threw her off the bridge, and the body never showed up. It's probably frozen. It's probably all the way out in the ocean.
Liam's question to the investigators in his interviews had indeed been suspicious. Not because she'd confided in him some plan to jump off the bridge, but because he'd been the one to push her.
We went to the bank. She took some money out, not all of her money. We're counting it out, and then she goes to walk out the front door. I choke her out, drag her. My biggest problem was the dog, and her dog laid there and watched as I killed her. Didn't do anything. I pretty much hung her, and it took me a half an hour to kill her. Set a timer, and it took me a half an hour after I hit start on the timer.
It had taken Sarah half an hour to die. Half an hour that Liam had coldly and callously timed on his phone. But when he left her house, crucially, he left without that phone. He'd misplaced it in the confusion.
I choke her out, drag her into the back, put her in a bathroom, and then I had to go straight to work. So Preston came over, took the body, put it in the bushes, and then I was at work. I left work a couple times, which looks sketchy. To look for my phone, though, which is a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, you gotta look for your phone. Yeah, you can't.
Which is kind of me losing my phone was kind of a good thing, because the cops are like, oh, he's hanging out with her. He lost his phone. He's going back and forth between his house looking for it. And then I get off work that night, go straight over. Then we take her body out of the bushes and drag it over to her back fence, and I crawl, get into her car, and I back up. There's a security camera across the street, so I had to act like her.
Liam tried to avoid detection, going to work to give himself an alibi and trying to reverse Sarah's car out of her driveway in the same way that Sarah would have done. He communicated with his accomplice via walkie-talkie when they were driving.
I got up on top of the bridge to throw her off. My plan was I was going to throw her off, run over, jump over the divider, and get into Preston's car. And then cars start coming up. I see headlights coming. I try to get her over, and I can't.
He'd underestimated how much a human body weighed and how exposed he was on the bridge. It was in a panic that he finally got her over the barrier and into the water, to disappear without trace. He then escaped in his accomplice's car. But why? Why would he kill this girl who'd confided in him, who thought he was her friend?
The worst part of it is, I thought I was walking out 50 grand, 100 grand in my pocket. She had one safe, and she took money out, and she only had 10 grand. And this money, I don't know if it was burnt or something. It's fucking old money, terrible quality. I didn't even get a quarter of it.
So you only got like, what, 7 grand?
Liam had killed her for money. The same money that he had mentioned in his interview, Sarah's money from her mom that she was using as her fund to go to Canada, was suddenly at the heart of this case. He spoke callously how he'd expected to make a larger profit out of her death. He was obsessed with protecting what he had and getting more money.
First it was in my house for a long time, but then I stopped trusting Preston.
Yeah, what's the deal with Preston? Did he end up like helping you or not?
Oh yeah. Dude, tonight we just tried to rob a drug dealer together.
Liam named his accomplice, Preston Taylor. Preston was Liam's roommate, and he'd also gone to school with Anthony, Liam, and Sarah. He'd even been Sarah's date to the junior prom. But when Liam found out about Sarah's supposed windfall inheritance, possibly even $100,000, these long friendships became secondary. He and Preston only thought about one thing: how they could get their hands on that money. This recorded confession was the evidence the police department needed. The next day, February 1st, they arrested both Liam McAtasney and Preston Taylor.
What we're most interested in knowing, not necessarily what happened, because we already know that. We want to know why it happened. All right? We want to know why Liam did what he did. What did he do? He killed Sarah. Okay? And we know you know that. Right? You know that. Correct? Yes.
It didn't take much for Preston to admit to knowing everything. He confirmed what Liam had told Anthony, that they'd planned this for the money.
Did he tell you ahead of time that he was going to do this? Yeah. How long do you think he planned to do this?
About a month. It wasn't too serious at first. The first time he told me about it, him and Sean came into Clancy's where I was working, and he just said, like, no intentions at this time, but Sarah just found a bunch of money, and that was it. And then it wasn't until about a month or two later he said that he was coming up with the idea, taking her out and then find somewhere to dispose of the body.
They'd formulated this plan together over a series of months, taking pains to make sure it wouldn't lead to their discovery. But now this plan was falling apart because Preston was talking to the investigators, fully cooperating. He told them exactly how that fateful day, Friday, December 2nd, had gone down.
And you went into the back door. There was nobody else home. All right, and what did you see when you went into the house?
I saw her body in the downstairs back bathroom.
Preston helped Liam hide the body and then waited at home in the house they shared for Liam to finish his shift at work. He came home a few times during the shift to look for his missing phone.
How would you describe his demeanor when he came home?
Just completely frantic and out of his wits.
Neither of them could find the phone anywhere, so when Liam finished work, they proceeded with the plan, going back to Sarah's house where her murdered body lay hidden.
You didn't pull up in front of her house, walk in her driveway and walk in.
No.
Why didn't you do that?
Liam told me that there was a camera on the neighbor's house across the street.
Still trying to cover their tracks, they drove Sarah's body to the bridge.
Did you have to help him lift her over?
Yeah, he had her on the sidewalk.
Later on, the investigators took Preston to the scene of the crime itself, the bridge over Shark River, and he showed them where he and Liam had disposed of her body.
Liam had lifted Sarah's body by the shoulders and gotten her partially up onto the curb, where I then grabbed her by the legs and hoisted her up onto the railing, and then I pushed her feet over so that she was going over the rest of the way.
When Sarah was in the water, they drove away with her money. First, they hid it in their attic. Then they buried it in a park. Some of it they spent on weed.
What did he need the money for?
I don't know. We were just starting to move out, and he was getting tired of his job at Brennan's.
Sarah Stern had been murdered for the sake of a few $1,000s.
What do you think about?
I think about what it means for me if it did come back to us.
Did you think it was going to?
They did a pretty good job of convincing me that she'd covered everything up.
He'd done a pretty good job of convincing the cops, too. If Anthony hadn't come forward, Sarah's murder might have remained a disappearance or suspected suicide forever, thanks to Liam's misdirections. They both thought they'd gotten away with it. They did everything they could to divert suspicion, including attending vigils and helping with the search, all the time pretending they had no idea what had happened to Sarah. But in April 2017, they were both charged with felony murder in the first degree. A conviction without a body is a rare thing indeed, but with Preston's confession and Anthony's video, there was a strong case against them. Preston pleaded guilty to robbery, conspiracy to commit robbery, desecrating Stern's remains, conspiring to desecrate her remains, and hindering his and McAtasney's arrest. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years and 3 months in exchange for his testimony against Liam. At his sentencing, Preston made a statement apologizing.
I'm truly from the bottom of my heart sorry.
Liam, however, had conveyed no remorse in the secret confession video and no remorse now.
I don't feel any different, and I don't think about it. You always think you're going to try these new things and you're going to change, but it didn't change. It just doesn't do anything.
In court, his argument was that in the video, he'd just been explaining the plot of a film to Anthony, that it had all been made up. There was little physical evidence after all, with Sarah's body having been washed out to sea. But there remained Liam's missing phone, which Sarah's family had found on her lawn the day after she was reported missing. The police discovered that its stopwatch function had been activated at 4:15 on December 2nd, when Liam had timed how long it took Sarah to die. The investigators had also found the safe buried at the park, containing the money they'd stolen, bills in a poor condition that matched the rest of the money still in Sarah's deposit box at the bank. The walkie-talkies Liam and Preston had used to coordinate were also submitted in evidence. As a result, the jury saw through Liam's defense. They found him guilty of first-degree murder, first-degree robbery, first-degree felony murder, second-degree conspiracy to commit robbery, second-degree disturbing or desecrating human remains, third-degree hindering, and fourth-degree tampering with physical evidence. He was sentenced to life without possibility of parole. He had murdered this girl he'd known since the age of 6, coldly and without remorse, for the sake of a few $1,000s. Now in their early 20s, he and Preston both remain in prison today after failed appeals, and Sarah's family continues to try to pick up the pieces. What do you think about this horrifying story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, keep up with our channel, and we will see you very soon on The Decoder.